My father threatened to cut me off if I didn't attend his wedding, but when he introduced his new wife, I realized how deeply I'd been disrespected. My father asked my ex as a VIP to his wedding, but I declined. I refused even though he threatened to cut me off. I couldn't contain my laughter when he presented his new bride. It wasn't a plea when my father looked me in the eye and said, "If you don't come to my wedding, we're done." It was not an appeal from a man hoping his daughter would be present on the most significant day of his life. A danger. Cold, given in the manner of canceling a subscription, as if I were something he had been planning to do for some time. It almost doesn't feel like a memory because I can recall the exact moment so well. It seemed as though I was looking through a glass at someone else's experience. We were seated in his kitchen, the one with the yellow backsplash that I grew up in. That's all. He gave me the impression that I had requested him to reschedule the Earth's rotation. He said, "Nathan is an important guest. He is well connected in the field. Vanessa is familiar with his people. Sophia, it's not personal. It has to do with logistics." Logistics? For 16 months of my life, Nathan Green had methodically destroyed my confidence, my money, and my capacity for interpersonal trust. While he charmed his way through our social group, he borrowed $12,500 over a period of what he called short-term gaps, money I had earned while doing doubles at a marketing agency. When I eventually confronted him with a list of dates and bank statements, he genuinely started crying, said he was going through a difficult time, promised to pay it back, and said I didn't understand how pressure operated. He never reimbursed any money. He was now seated as a VIP at my father's wedding, and because of his connections, I was being asked to sit next to him as if nothing had happened. My father remarked, "That was your relationship. It's my wedding." I gazed at him. "I'm being asked to sit next to the man who stole from me. For 4 hours, please behave like an adult." I didn't finish the coffee before leaving. I should tell you about my father, William Montgomery, because you need to know who he was at his best in order to comprehend how we came to be this way. He truly is a self-made man. Grew up in a Detroit 2-bedroom apartment with a father who left before William began school and a mother who worked in hospital laundry. Created a small consultancy for commercial real estate out of almost nothing. Began with a used suit and a gift to help others feel understood. We had a kitchen with a yellow backsplash, and a large enough patio to host a proper party by the time I was 10. He was appearing in local business journals by the time I was 16. My dad was that. Because his new fiancée had logistics, the man across the dining table told me to handle the person who had stolen from me as an adult. That was a different person. Alternatively, it might have been the same man rearranged according to a different gravity. He had known Vanessa for a full year. I'd met her twice. She had been warm in a manner that seemed practiced both times. Warmth that strikes all the right notes but falls short of the eyes. I had convinced myself that I was being unjust. I had convinced myself that I was projecting. My dad was content. Since my mother's death 6 years ago, he had been by himself. He was deserving of something nice. I said a lot of things to myself. The evening after our chat in the kitchen, he gave me a call. This time it's calmer. I claimed to understand how hurt I was. Expressed his hope that I would change my mind. Vanessa said that the invitation to attend the wedding was still open, and that perhaps I needed some time and space. Vanessa had said, that sentence landed wrong. I had no idea. Presuming it was a delivery for the incorrect unit, he stated. My dad was there. I gave him a buzz. He was wearing an overcoat I had never seen before when I opened the door. Expensive buttons, charcoal wool, the kind of coat you purchase when someone pushes you to improve your appearance. He had set his jaw. On a Tuesday night, he had traveled 45 minutes from his home to stand in my doorway. "I need you at this wedding," he declared. "No greetings, Sophia. I really do mean it. We're done if you skip this. No calls, no dinners, nothing." He used it as if he were explaining the repercussions of a contract violation. "Do you wish to discard this family because of a sitting arrangement? You have the option." I stared at him for a long time. I needed this man, who had spent 2 hours sitting in a hostile parking lot. In order to coach my soccer squad, this man learned offsides regulations by watching YouTube lessons. I said, "You're picking my ex over me. I'm going to go with respect." I nearly chuckled. Nearly. Rather, I declined, silently. The manner in which you express yourself when you truly mean it. I then shut the door. After that, I stood in my hallway for a while without crying. I just stood there and listened to his footsteps retreating down the hallway, thinking of the parking lot, the yellow backsplash, and the dog he intended to get when he retired. After that, I went to make tea and tried not to think about it. Early in October, the wedding took place on a Saturday. I know because it kept showing up in my calendar, in my peripheral vision, in a group chat that I eventually blocked, and in a voicemail from my Aunt Karen informing me that I was making a grave error and that Vanessa seemed like a really kind woman. I texted Aunt Karen to express my gratitude for her concern and ended the conversation there. That Saturday, I went to the farmer's market, rearranged my bookshelf, and watched a documentary about dog grooming competitions. It was all right. I left a Meridian Street bookstore 16 days later. Just after noon on a Sunday, I was carrying a bag of secondhand paperbacks when I heard someone call my name, Sophia. I pivoted. My father was there, smiling with the unique satisfaction of a guy who feels he has won something, his arm wrapped around his new bride. Beside him was Vanessa Moore, dressed in an oversized pair of sunglasses, a cream jacket, and a casual hairstyle that cost several $100s. She was stunning, she was calm, she appeared to be waiting for someone to take her picture as she stood on a public sidewalk. My father said, "Meet her," with a smug demeanor that he probably wasn't aware of. My wife. As soon as I saw her face, a part of my brain malfunctioned. Since I recognized that face, not from our two encounters. Her hair had changed, her makeup had been softer, and her appearance had been a little warmer overall. No, that face was familiar to me from somewhere else. Somewhere I hadn't considered in nearly a year. My mind was going through data so quickly that I was on the verge of vertigo. After that, it touched down. I burst out laughing. Not courteously. It's the kind of laugh that begins in your chest and escapes before you can decide what to do. It's not the small polite chuckle you make when something is somewhat humorous. Uncontrolled, a little crazy, the kind that only occurs when reality presents something so ridiculous that your body is unable to react in a more sensible way. Like a building losing its foundation, my father's smile crumbled. I glanced at her and then back at him, asking, "What's so funny?" I was still half laughing as I tried to gather myself by putting my fingers to my mouth. "Dad, you really ought to have done a background check," I stated as soon as I could. "Let me tell you about the Thursday night that altered my entire worldview." I had been volunteering with a downtown legal assistance organization for about a year before to that encounter on the sidewalk. Volunteers like myself handled intake for the organization, which matched low-income residents with pro bono attorneys, simple paperwork, making appointments, and organizing documents. Practical, unglamorous job. One evening, a small group of us were called into a conference room for what she called a case study session. Helen Park, a supervising attorney with 16 years of experience in civil law, the kind of woman who had 3 colored sticky note systems operating simultaneously and still thought yours was ineffective to help us understand the patterns that appeared in fraud cases so we could flag anything unusual during intake. She took us through a composite file. A self-made woman in her mid to late 50s who sought males of a specific profile, worked under several names, was recently widowed or divorced, and was used to allusions to family members being challenging. Hints that he was being drained by some friendships. Creating a world in which she was the most dependable person. The exodus came when financial access was provided. A picture from the composite file was displayed to us by Helen. Although it was blurry and captured from a distance, the face was enough visible. The woman in that picture had a different overall style and lighter hair. I would never have connected the woman on the sidewalk with the blazer she was sporting. However, the face remained the same. Vanessa Moore was the name in Helen Park's file. It was the same woman who identified herself as Veronica Hale, and stood behind my father. This sounds familiar to me. I know the first reaction is to question, "Are you sure?" I asked myself that. I made a tough question. Standing on that sidewalk, I cycled through all the logical objections, light tricks, similarities, and my own prejudice against this woman. And I continued to reach the same location. The structure of the bones beneath the makeup. The way she carried herself. The tiny scar on her left eyebrow's outer corner. That statement struck me like icy water, even though it was barely noticeable. This is exactly why I told you she was unstable. Instead of asking what is she talking about? Or unstable, what do you mean? She had jumped right into a pre-planted story. A story that she had already established. My dad furrowed his brow, not at her yet, but in the convoluted manner of a man juggling 2 things at once. It had not been a practical invitation to Jason. All of a sudden, it was blatantly clear. When a woman studies her target, she keeps variables under control. Nathan Green would have come to her attention in the same manner as everything else. She would have known exactly what would happen if she invited him to the front table. It was a provocation meant to start a confrontation and force me to leave before I could take a closer look. I had been tricked. I took a breath and steadied myself for months. "Dad," I responded, sounding more composed than I had anticipated. The smallest thing appeared on her face as she said, "Her name isn't Veronica. Start with Vanessa Moore. Vanessamoore. 1 microsecond. Not nearly a recoil. She was too composed to recoil. It's more like a recalibration. The following expression was ready after the shortest visible gap. My father saw it. I observed him as he saw it. He questioned her, "Have you ever used another name?" Silent. Particular. She gave him a beautifully indignant smile. "Richard, seriously? She's doing this on purpose." That's not an answer. Her hand that had been on his arm dropped away, but her smile remained unwavering. The ideal wedding he had chosen above his own daughter started to gradually disintegrate there, on a Sunday sidewalk outside a bookstore, with old paperbacks in my bag and autumn leaves skittering past our feet. After that, she applied intense pressure. She called me vindictive on the sidewalk. She referred to the occasion as a performance. With the unique subtlety of someone twisting a blade, She hinted to my father that this was just the most recent example of a lengthy pattern and that I had always struggled to accept his happiness. My dad begged her to explain. She told him that she felt humiliated by my actions. Flat and toneless, he said. Then clear it up. She insisted that they go. He remained still. In just 90 seconds, I saw her recalibrate twice more, going from hurt dignity to righteous indignation to something softer and more calculated, like watching a dial being changed. It was remarkable in a horrible manner. It was an excellent performance. I could have appeared irrational if I hadn't known what I knew and hadn't seen that file photo in a conference room a year earlier. We remained there for a little while longer. Then, with her heels clicking, she headed for the parking garage. My dad watched her leave. Then he gave me a look that I hadn't seen on his face in a long time. Doubt. Not the easy to disregard skepticism of a guy who has chosen not to search, genuine doubt. The type that enters beneath your ribcage. I'll be in touch, he said. He was, that same night. Since I've seen variations of this story told as if the narrator coasted through on righteous assurance, I want to be honest about how the next 80 hours truly felt. That Sunday evening, I used my laptop and a yellow legal pad to sit at my kitchen table and go through everything I could find about the Vanessa Moore file, which wasn't much because Helen Park's program followed stringent confidentiality guidelines and it was a legal aid training document I had only seen once and hadn't taken a picture of. After writing out all I could recall, including the Florida link, the name, the target's profiles, and the timeline pattern, I spent about 2 hours second-guessing myself. What happens if you're mistaken? What happens if you ruin your father's marriage because of a similarity? What if Veronica Hale is a real person with a real identity and you've just publicly accused her of being a fraud on a sidewalk? Then, when your father visits his wife's house, she will calmly and kindly explain how his daughter has always done this, and he will believe her, and you'll have burned the last bridge? While doing the dishes, my hands were trembling. When I saw them, I forced myself to set down the dishes and remain motionless for a minute. I then gave my dad a call. On the second ring, he heard it. He claimed to have begun making calls already. That same afternoon, he had made contact with James Lee, a private investigator who operated a small business specializing in background checks for high-value business deals. He had previously been employed by my father twice in business settings. Apparently, before he had even driven home, he had called him from the parking garage. I need you to tell me everything you know, my dad said. He sounded 10 years older, as if someone had squeezed him. I told him everything. The picture, the name, the pattern, the legal aid program, and Helen Park's case study session. I told him about the way she'd gone instantly to the pre-planted narrative on the sidewalk, and why that sequence mattered. He was silent for some while. The Nathan thing, he murmured at last. Engineered, I said. I think she found out about him and used him. She needed me away from the wedding before I could look too closely. Another moment of stillness. I should have listened to you, he said. I didn't say yes. I didn't say I told you so. I just said, get the documentation first, then we'll talk. 80 hours after my father engaged James Lee, who has 14 years of experience in investigative services, a background as a paralegal, and 3 years of experience investigating fraud referrals for a regional insurance consortium, he submitted a preliminary report. Over the phone, my father read it to me. By then, his voice was completely flat. The flattened voice of a man who has dealt with the worst of things and reached a point beyond shock when nothing is more than the facts. Vanessa Moore now. The name was verified. It was a genuine identity with clean records dating back around 2 years, which James Lee pointed out was a possible red flag in and of itself because buying a rehabilitated identity sometimes looks like 2 years of clean paper. Before that, the paperwork became unclear. Vanessa Marsh, who has 2 legal suits in Georgia, has a different last name linked to the same biometric information. One contested credit account, one discreetly resolved breach of contract claim. The Florida case came next. When James pulled it, it was still pending. An account with 61-year-old retired real estate entrepreneur Gerald Clark. Just before the engagement ended, Vanessa Marsh stopped being approachable at any number Gerald Clark had for her, and $40,000 was taken out in a 17-day period. The civil complaint was filed 8 months ago by Gerald Clark's lawyer. Preliminary processes, brief relationships, affluent men, increased intimacy, controlled isolation, financial access, and abrupt departure had all contributed to the case's stagnation. My father was married to Helen Park, the subject of the case study. Nathan Green, too? James Lee also tugged at that thread. Since he was requested to do so by my father. Since the sidewalk, that portion of the narrative had been subtly bugging us both. Nathan was able to connect with at least 3 persons in his overlapping social and professional circles. Vanessa Moore acting as Vanessa Marsh within 2 degrees. One of those connections was made at a real estate networking event in Scottsdale 16 months ago. At that time, Nathan had reappeared in my father's social circle thanks to a mutual colleague introduction that my father had mentioned in passing and that I now vividly recalled. Nathan's ties to my father's business have nothing to do with his VIP seat. It has to do with his relationship to her operation. He had been designated as the point of access, the familiar, amiable visage that might approach without raising any red flags. I was left out for the same reason that he was invited. One action accomplished both goals. My father's social calendar had not brought the ex who had stolen $12,500 from me back into my life at random. They had put him there. My father closed his accounts within 12 hours of James Lee's preliminary assessment. He placed protection holds on 3 accounts and 1 investment vehicle that Vanessa had only partial visibility into after calling his bank's fraud department and speaking with Teresa Okafor, a manager who specialized in financial elder abuse cases. Teresa Okafor instructed him to record every financial discussion he could remember having with Vanessa regarding his assets and guided him through what she called a contact freeze protocol. That evening, he returned home with a recording app on his phone and a folder containing documentation. I'll continue to refer to her as Vanessa, since that's how I knew her, even if it belongs to her in the same way that a garment belongs to its wearer. Over the course of the next 48 hours, she attempted a number of things. She put the injured wife to the test. She attempted righteous rage. She attempted the tender intervention of a woman worried about her husband's mental health, gently advising my father that it could be worthwhile to talk to a professional about the stress caused by Sophia's claims. At one time, she attempted something more delicate and personal, which my father just mentioned in passing, and I didn't press him about it. 2 weeks ago, none of it would have landed that way. Those methods had a prepared surface to stick to 2 weeks earlier. The surface had vanished now. She paused when he showed her only the Florida case reference from James Lee's preliminary report. She became motionless. Then Mother remarked, "You need to think carefully about what you're doing." My father said, "I have." Mother packed a bag that night with the unique precision of someone who has prepared luggage in comparable situations before. No slammed door, no dramatic departure. She didn't turn around as she left with a rolling carry-on. When there was nothing more to be done, the performance came to an end. He later informed me that's when he found out. The last doubt vanished at that point, because he would have clashed with the woman he believed he would marry. She would have been heartbroken. She would have made 16 calls to his mobile and shown up in tears at the home of a mutual acquaintance. However, Vanessa Moore's interest in Veronica Hale was limited to what the character could go through. Veronica Hale just vanished after extraction was no longer an option. The next week, my father filed for annulment. Given the fraud elements and the material James Lee had gathered, his attorney, Patricia Voss, who has 22 years of experience in family law and seemed to have examined every document before the hearing began, informed him that the grounds were solid. Gerald Clark's Florida lawsuit was still pending in court. Gerald's lawyer was contacted by Patricia, and the two of them started creating a coordinated evidentiary record. Nathan Green vanished. He didn't send a rushed SMS apology, or leave the nation in a spectacular manner. He simply stopped being reachable, stopped returning my father's calls, and ceased showing up at the business gatherings where he had been a regular. I learned that he had moved to a different city 3 months later through a mutual acquaintance. The nicest thing that could have happened was that I never heard from him again. The proper methods were used to get in touch with Helen Park's legal assistance group. Obviously, she couldn't talk to me about case files, and I didn't ask her to. However, she acknowledged the information I gave and assured me that it would be properly assessed in the calm manner of someone who has a great deal of experience taking information without responding. After Vanessa Moore left my father's house with a rolling carry-on, I had no idea what happened to her. I believe the Florida case against her eventually ended in a civil judgment. I am aware that police enforcement was given access to James Lee's report. Systems that operate at their own speed are responsible for what transpired after that. I gave up looking for updates on her. I have no narrative to tell about that. About 6 weeks after it all started, my father and I went to lunch. He suggested the eatery. When I was in high school, we used to go there on Sundays. The kind of local Italian restaurant with a pasta special written on a chalkboard and wine bottles wrapped in baskets on the shelf. Even though we both knew he was going to buy the same item he always ordered, he was there when I got there, coffee in hand, already perusing the menu. He appeared to be older. Not heartbroken. Although he is older, my father is not a man who causes destruction. It was as if he had been given something that weighted a certain. In a speech, he did not offer an apology. He continued, "I want to be honest about that too. There were things said that don't unsay themselves, and a version of my father I'd seen across a kitchen table that I couldn't fully unlearn. Trust doesn't reconstruct itself the way it broke. It rebuilds differently, with visible seams. But we were both there, and we both stayed. That mattered." I met Aunt Karen at a family birthday celebration 3 months later. Throughout the entire story, she had left me around 12 voicemails, and she had consistently and tenderly been incorrect at every turn. As Mom had done since I was little, she drew me close to the appetizer table and held my face in her hands. "I owe you an apology," she said. "Aunt Karen? She seems so sweet." "They always do," I replied. She considered this. "How did you know?" I pondered a Thursday night legal aid training session, A grainy snapshot in a conference room, and the kind of knowledge that remains dormant in your mind until the precise moment it's needed, like a fire door you hope you never have to use. I paid attention, I replied. Aunt Karen nodded as if this were knowledge. A long time before any of this happened, I paid attention when it didn't seem important. That's all. It is. A little. It's also just luck. Paying attention at the right time, in the right room, 12 months before you need what you learn there, that's not strategy. That's chance. I was lucky. But I showed up for my own luck. I didn't talk myself out of what I saw on that sidewalk. I didn't choose comfortable doubt over difficult certainty. I didn't close my eyes because keeping them open was going to cost something. That part, I earned. My parents mocked my business skills, called my job little. Then the board chairman came a bomb. She owns 60% of the company now. As the room froze in shock. Dad's patronizing laugh reverberated off the mahogany walls as the boardroom fell silent. I had anticipated this moment. I have been constructing my investing portfolio in total secrecy for 5 years. I watched for 5 years while my parents disregarded every suggestion I made regarding their faltering tech manufacturing business. Let the adults handle things at every family dinner, dear, after 5 years. However, this was not how I had anticipated the confrontation to transpire. 30 years ago, my parents, Robert and Evelyn Mercer, founded Mercer Technologies as a garage enterprise. They produced specialized circuit boards for use in aircraft. They also controlled their specialty for 20 years. However, the past 7 years had been terrible. They were losing money due to foreign competition, a lack of innovation, and, to be honest, some extremely bad financial choices. Claire, their daughter and only child, had majored in a pointless subject. Computational finance and applied mathematics at MIT, they claim. I took a job at what my mother referred to as my little job at a Boston boutique investing firm after graduating. They were unaware that I was more than just an analyzer. I had a partner. And over the past 5 years, I've made very deliberate investing choices that have expanded my own portfolio from my signing bonus and early stock options into a sizable amount, really large. Mercer Technologies was on the verge of collapse, which prompted the emergency board meeting. They were in danger of filing for bankruptcy in 10 weeks after burning through their credit lines and upsetting 2 significant clients with delayed deliveries. I had purposefully arrived late, sneaking into a seat at the back of the room, even though the board had been meeting for 3 hours. Mom had seen me right away. "What are you doing here, Claire?" "It's a board meeting," I answered softly, keeping my voice level. "I was invited." In fact, Dad had laughed. "Invited? This is serious business, honey. We are talking about the company's future." "I am aware of that. Do you?" "Because we're discussing complicated financial restructuring, debt-to-equity swaps, and convertible notes." Mom's tone was acerbic. "You can't Google this." I would open my laptop silently. The board members shuffled uneasily. The majority of them understood my purpose for being there. My parents were obviously unaware of the chairman's insistence that I go. Their CFO, Andrew Collins, had attempted to reroute. "Maybe we should carry on with the agenda, Robert and Evelyn. The refinancing proposals need to be discussed." Still staring at me, Dad said, "In a minute. I know you're trying to be encouraging, Claire, but this isn't really suitable. These conversations regarding the company's financial status are private." I gently said, "I am aware of the financial situation. Over a 5-year period, revenue decreased by 38%. $22 million in operating losses in only the most recent quarter. You might have 10 weeks of runway at the current burn rate." The room fell silent. Mom blushed. "You heard those statistics, but where?" "The initial financial statements. Last week, I went over them. These reports are private." Dad lost his temper. "Who gave these to you?" One of the original angel investors and board chairman, Charles Whitmore, cleared his throat. "Evelyn, Robert, I believe we must." "No, this is totally unsuitable." Mom cut me off. "I'm not sure what you're doing, Claire, but you have to go right now." I stayed put. "I have the ability to vote on this board. I am perfectly entitled to be here." In fact, Dad laughed once more. Every time I tried to talk business with them, I got that same patronizing voice that I had heard my entire life, a voting participant. "Claire, you have no stock in Mercer Technologies. The board does not include you. I'm not sure who informed you that you could simply enter a board meeting." Charles whispered that she owned half of the business. The words lingered in the atmosphere like an unexploded bomb. Mom gently turned to look at Charles. "What did you just say?" "Claire controls 50% of Mercer Technologies. For the last 18 months, she has been accumulating shares. She has been our biggest stakeholder for the past 6 months." I saw my father's expression shift from bewilderment to astonishment to rage. "That is not feasible. The shares are held in close proximity. Any transfer would require our approval." Charles clarified that the shares she bought came from 3 board members who sold their positions as well as the employee stock option pool. Every lawful arm's-length transaction, duly recorded with the SEC. Mom remarked, "This is absurd." However, the assurance in her voice had diminished. "That's not the kind of money Claire has." Are you aware of the value of 50% of this business? I said, it's about $500 million based on your most recent valuation. In all honesty, though, that valuation was high. I would place the genuine worth closer to $380 million based on current performance, meaning I overpaid by roughly $120 million. The ensuing hush was overwhelming. Andrew's fingers were speeding over the keys as he gazed at the screen of his laptop. He's right, by God. All of the filings are available here. How could I have missed this? I clarified that the acquisitions were done through 3 separate LLCs. They're all appropriately stated, but it would take some research to link them all to me. With a loud scrape of his chair on the floor, Dad got to his feet. What game are you playing, Claire? This seems like a joke. Dad turned to the board members, almost pleading for their sanity. No game, Dad. I'm an investor, and frankly, I'm a concerned one. This company is in serious trouble. She can't even read a balance sheet, he added. His voice was growing louder now, no longer sounding polished. Her age is 28. She is employed as a junior analyst of some sort. Charles cut her off. She's a managing partner at Quantum Capital. For the past 2 years, she has managed their tech portfolio. Last year, her fund made a 38% return. Mom had turned pale. That's not possible. We would have been aware. You would have informed us. Why? I just asked. You might thus write it off the same way you've written off everything else I've ever done. Tell me how the real world is beyond my comprehension. Tell me that my small job isn't a legitimate business. Mom yelled, don't take that tone with us. However, her voice had a hint of desperation. Now, then don't dismiss me in a board meeting, I said, maintaining my composure. I nodded to a board member who appeared noticeably uneasy. I'm here as an investor, a majority investor, actually, since I closed a purchase agreement this morning for an additional 8% from Daniel Langford. I'm now at 60%. Majority stakeholder. The room exploded. At once, 3 board members began to converse. Andrew was typing in a panic. My parents simply gazed at me as if I had developed a second head. Charles pounded his gavel. Order, please, let's everybody calm down and address this rationally. There's nothing rational about this, Dad replied. Now his voice was harsher but quieter. If this is true, and I'm not saying I believe it yet, but if it's true, then what? What exactly do you think you're going to do, Claire? Swoop in and save the company with your vast business experience? I'm going to vote to approve the restructuring plan Charles proposed. I replied. Mom turned to Charles and said, the one you were about to reject. What restructuring plan? Charles passed a document across the table. Quantum Capital, through one of its funds, has offered a $250 million investment. It would give Mercer Technologies the capital to retool the manufacturing line, invest in the R&D you've been cutting, and hire the senior management you desperately need. In exchange, they take a convertible note that would allow them to increase their equity position to 65% if certain performance milestones aren't met. Absolutely not, Dad replied right away. We're not diluting ourselves into minority shareholders of our own company. You already are minority shareholders, I replied. This is corporate rating, Mom remarked, her voice trembling with rage. I own 60% as of this morning. You're trying to steal the company we built. I'm trying to save it, I replied. If you file for bankruptcy, you'll lose everything. The company will be liquidated, the brand will be sold for parts, and the 300 employees will lose their jobs. This way, the company survives, grows, and everybody keeps their jobs. Under your control, Dad angrily remarked. Under professional management, I clarified, I'm voting to retain Charles as chairman. I'm voting to bring in Caroline Hayes from Innovate as CEO, and I'm voting to create a new executive committee that will actually hold leadership accountable to the board. Mom whispered, and what about us? I looked her in the eye. You'll remain on the board. You'll keep your salaries reduced to market rate. And you'll have the satisfaction of watching the company you built continue to exist, instead of being dismantled in bankruptcy court. This is insane, said Dad. He was pacing now, running his hands through his hair. You're 28 years old. You've been working for what, 7 years? And you expect us to believe you have $500 million to invest in a struggling manufacturing company? I had $700 million under management as of last quarter. I stated composedly, personally, that doesn't count the $4.5 billion in the funds I manage for Quantum. The Mercer Technologies investment represents about 70% of my personal portfolio. It's a significant bet, yes, but I've run the models with proper management and the right capital investment. This company can be worth $2.5 billion in 5 years. Andrew was slowly nodding. The models are actually conservative. If we can lock down the SpaceX contract she's referring to in her analysis. Mom interrupted, what SpaceX contract? The one I've been negotiating for the last 5 months, I said. They need a specialized circuit board manufacturer for their next generation Starlink satellites. Mercer Technologies has the perfect capabilities, but you don't have the capital to handle the order volume. With Quantum's investment, you'd be able to expand production enough to handle it. It's a $400 million contract over 4 years with options for renewal. Once more, there was total silence in the room. Dad was no longer pacing. Mom was holding onto the table's edge. At last, Mom said, "Why? If you have all this money, all this success, why invest in us? You could have let us fail. You could have bought the assets in bankruptcy for pennies on the dollar. Because despite everything, it's still the company you built." I replied quietly. Because 300 people depend on these jobs. Because the technology is actually good, the brand has value, and the market opportunity is real. And because I wanted to prove that I could do it. Dad said, "Prove what?" "That I understand business," I uttered. The words lingered in the atmosphere. I saw my mother avert her gaze and my father's cheeks flush. Charles cleared his throat. "I think we should take a 20-minute recess. Let everybody process this information. Then we can reconvene and vote on the restructuring proposal." The majority of the board members avoided making eye contact with my parents as they filed out. The SEC filings were still visible on the screen when Andrew left his laptop open. At the door, Charles hesitated. I nodded and accompanied him into the corridor, leaving my parents by themselves in the boardroom. "Claire, could I speak with you outside?" he said. Charles said, "That was brutal," once we were out of earshot. "It was necessary," I answered. "You could have told them privately." Before the meeting, I tried. 4 months ago, I called Dad and told him I wanted to discuss the company's financial situation. He told me I should focus on my career and let him worry about the business. I gave a headshake. They weren't going to listen unless they had no choice. Charles gave a slow nod. "The restructuring plan is solid. Caroline Hayes is an excellent choice for CEO. But you know this is going to destroy your relationship with your parents." I questioned, "What relationship?" "The one where they dismiss everything I say. Where every achievement is diminished because it doesn't match their definition of success. Where I'm still treated like a child who doesn't understand how the world works." "They're proud of what they built," Charles remarked. "This company has been their entire life." "I know, and I'm trying to make sure it survives, but they have to understand that their way isn't working anymore. The market has changed. The technology has changed. They needed to evolve, and they refused. And now you're forcing their hand." "Yes," Charles said after giving me a thorough examination. "You know, when you first approached me about buying my shares, I almost said no. I thought you were too young, too inexperienced. But then I looked at your track record, looked at the companies you'd invested in, the returns you generated. You have an instinct for this that most people spend decades developing." "My parents taught me everything about manufacturing," I replied. "They just didn't realize they were also teaching me how to spot inefficiencies, how to analyze markets, how to evaluate risk. I just applied those lessons to finance instead of circuit boards." Ironic, isn't it? Extremely. For a few period, we stood silently and observed my parents sitting at opposite ends of the long table without exchanging words through the boardroom windows. "They're going to fight this," Charles said. "They're going to look for any legal angle to block the restructuring." "I know, that's why I made sure every filing was perfect, every transaction was arm's length, every disclosure was timely. They won't discover anything wrong even if they hire the world's top attorneys. This is something you've been preparing for a while." I verified that it was 18 months. I've been aware of how dire things had become ever since I first viewed the quarterly financials. Charles shook his head slowly. "Your parents are brilliant engineers. They built revolutionary technology, but they're terrible managers and they're even worse at admitting when they need help. That's why the restructuring plan puts real operators in charge. People who know how to scale a manufacturing business, how to manage supply chains, how to handle growth. My parents can focus on what they're actually good at, engineering and product development, just not running the day-to-day operations." "Think they'll accept that?" "They don't have a choice. I control 60% of the shares. I can outvote them on any decision." "That's not what I asked." I exhaled. "No, probably not. At least not at first. But eventually when the company stabilizes and starts growing again, maybe they'll understand. And if they don't, then at least 300 people keep their jobs and a good company doesn't die because of ego and stubbornness." 20 minutes turned into 25, then 30. Charles finally proposed that we get together again. Returning to their seats around the table, the board members filed in. The last people inside were my parents, who sat together at one end to put up a unified face. The meeting was called to order by Charles. "We have a proposal on the table for a $250 million investment from Quantum Capital in exchange for convertible notes and board restructuring. I'd like to open the floor for discussion before we vote." Dad said, "I have something to say," and got to his feet. He had regained some of his control, and when he was giving a speech he thought was significant, his voice had that official tone. "What Claire has done here today is legal, perhaps, but it's not ethical. She's used her position, her knowledge of our vulnerabilities, to orchestrate a hostile takeover of the company her mother and I spent 30 years building." "Claire," I started, but he held up a hand. "I'm not finished. You sat in our home, ate at our table, and said nothing while you were secretly buying up shares in our company. You positioned yourself to swoop in when we were most vulnerable and seized control. And now you want us to simply accept that we're minority shareholders in our own company, that we should step aside and let some outsider take over. Caroline Hayes isn't an outsider, I said coolly. She's one of the most respected operators in the industry. She took Innovate from $60 million in revenue to $950 million in 9 years. She's not us, Mom remarked. She doesn't understand our culture, our values, what we've built here. With respect, Andrew interjected quietly. Our culture and values won't matter if the company goes bankrupt in 3 months. Mom turned on Andrew, asking, whose side are you on, Andrew? I'm on the side of the 300 employees who depend on their paychecks, Andrew firmly stated. I'm on the side of the pension fund that covers their retirement. I'm on the side of keeping this company alive, and Claire's plan is the only viable option on the table. That's not true, Dad countered. We have other offers. We could. You have one other offer, Charles said. From Davidson Industrial. They're offering $150 million for the assets in bankruptcy. They'll keep maybe 50 employees to handle the transition, then shut down the facility and move production to their plant in Malaysia. Everyone else loses their job. There have to be other options, Mom urged. There aren't, I said. I've spent 5 months looking. I've talked to every strategic buyer, every private equity firm, every investment bank that might have an interest. The market for specialized circuit board manufacturers is brutal right now. You're competing against companies with lower costs, better technology, and deeper pockets. The only reason Quantum is willing to invest is because I'm willing to bet my personal capital on the turnaround, and because I've already secured the SpaceX contract contingent on this restructuring. You should have come to us, Dad replied. And his voice cracked a little for the first time. You should have told us what you were planning. I tried to tell you 4 months ago that the company was in trouble. You told me I didn't understand business. That was different. How? I inquired. How was it different? I tried to offer advice, tried to point out the problems I was seeing, and you dismissed me. Just like you've dismissed me my entire life whenever I tried to talk about business or finance or strategy. That's not fair, Mom remarked. Isn't it? I asked, giving her a direct look. How many times have you told me my degree was impractical? How many times have you called my job cute or sweet? How many dinners have you told me to leave the business, talk to people who understand it? The stillness that followed was heavy with years of repressed hatred. I didn't want it to be like this, I finally replied. I wanted to help. I wanted to use what I've learned, what I've built to save the company you created. But you couldn't see me as anything other than your daughter who doesn't understand the real world. Dad responded, you're 28 years old, but the conviction in his voice had faded. I'm 28 years old with $700 million under management and a track record of successful investments in 20 different companies. I responded, I'm 28 years old who saw the SpaceX opportunity you missed. I'm 28 years old who put together a restructuring plan that will save 300 jobs. At what point do I stop being too young and start being someone you listen to? Nobody knew how to respond to that. Charles cleared his throat. I think we should vote. All in favor of accepting the Quantum Capital restructuring proposal? Without delay, I held up my hand. Charles lifted his. Andrew. 6 out of 11 board members, including 3 others, were against it. My parents held out their hands. They were joined by 2 additional board members who were former co-workers. 4 votes against. The motion carries, declared Charles. The restructuring is approved. Dad suddenly got to his feet. We'll challenge this. We'll find a lawyer who can prove that Claire manipulated the situation, used insider information. Every trade was logged and disclosed, Andrew muttered. I've reviewed every transaction, they're all clean. Robert, you can employ any attorney in New York. Nothing will change as a result. I couldn't quite interpret Mom's expression as she stared at me. Anger, hurt, or something else. There's one more item on the agenda, Charles stated. Claire has requested to address the full company staff tomorrow at 10 a.m. She wants to explain the restructuring and answer questions. I think that's appropriate given her position as majority shareholder. Absolutely not, Dad replied. Those are our employees. They're the company's employees. And they deserve to hear what's happening from someone who can actually answer their questions about job security in the future, I gently corrected. What you've done here today, Claire, Mom muttered as she got up and gathered her belongings. This is wrong, she continued. It goes beyond business. Your family has been ruined by your control and money. I've saved your company, I responded, whether you can see that or not. The other board members filed out more slowly, some pausing to shake my hand or whisper, congratulations. My parents departed without saying anything more. At last, it was just Charles, Andrew, and me in the boardroom, with others completely avoiding eye contact. Well, Andrew replied, that was the most dramatic board meeting I've attended in 40 years of corporate finance. It had to be done, Charles replied. Robert and Evelyn would have driven this company into the ground rather than admit they needed help. Are they going to get over this? As people, I mean, not as executives, Andrew inquired. I don't know, I said after giving that subject some attention. Perhaps in the future, or perhaps they will never be able to forgive me for disproving them. For what it's worth, Charles remarked, you made the correct decision. It's the right thing, not the easy thing. I should get ready for tomorrow's meeting, I said as I closed my laptop and gathered my documents. There will be a lot of questions from the staff. Claire, Andrew asked as I got to the door. Is that SpaceX deal truly solid? Verbal commitment from their VP of supply chain, I said with a small smile. Their legal team is finalizing the terms of the contract. Signatures ought to be received in 4 weeks. Why? Because if you do that, this business not only survives but flourishes. You'll have turned it from a struggling manufacturing into a vital supplier to the world's largest space corporation. That's the plan, I said. I learned to think large from my parents. They simply didn't anticipate that I would think more expansively than they did. As the sun began to set over the parking lot, I left the building to find my phone buzzing with messages. Caroline Hayes wanted to talk about transition planning. My lawyer wanted to make sure the restructuring documents were filed correctly. My quantum capital team wanted updates, and my parents had not responded. For a long time, I sat in my car and gazed at the Mercer Technologies building. 30 years of my parents' labor. 30 years of innovation. 30 years of difficulty. 30 years of triumph. And finally 30 years of failure to adapt, and now it was my responsibility to make it right. When my phone buzzed once more, it was Charles saying, there will be an employee meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m. B is the conference room. There will be about 300 persons present. The majority are afraid. Prepare yourself for challenging inquiries. In response, I typed, I'm ready. And I was. I'd spent 18 months preparing for this moment, 5 months negotiating the SpaceX contract, countless hours examining every part of the business. I understood the company better than my parents did now. Every manufacturing line, every efficiency ratio, every cost center. I was unprepared for the hollow feeling in my chest when I thought about my mother's face as she had left the boardroom and the way my father's voice had cracked when he had asked why I hadn't come to them, even though I had tried to do so 4 months, 7 months, and a year ago, but each time had been met with condescension, dismissal, and the same worn-out refrain that I didn't understand business. Now that they were aware of my business acumen, the question was whether they would ever comprehend my motivation. I turned on my car and drove away from Mercer Technologies, the building that symbolized my parents' whole lives and the business that their daughter, who couldn't even read a balance sheet, now controlled in large part. Tomorrow, I would stand in front of 300 terrified workers and explain how we were going to save their jobs. I would also announce the SpaceX contract, lay out the restructuring plan, and introduce Caroline Hayes as their new CEO. All the while, my parents would be in the back of the room, watching their daughter, the one who didn't understand business, worked a small job, and needed to let the adults handle important things, explain how she'd saved everything they'd built. The company would survive, the jobs would be spared, and that had to be sufficient, even if it meant my parents might never talk to me again. It was unclear if they would appreciate me or despise me. On my wedding day, Dad called, we'll celebrate later. They chose the Maldives over me. Months later, he asked for forgiveness, but I was done pretending. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 31. And on the day I married the guy I love, the entire family row at my wedding was terribly empty. There was no father walking me down the aisle, no mother dabbing her eyes, no sister waving from the front, only white chairs and a silence that shouted louder than any organ music. My father called me from an airport gate several hours before I put on my dress. He sounded rushed and almost irritated. We'll celebrate later, kiddo. You know how it is. This trip was already booked. In the background, I could hear boarding announcements and my sister's laughter coming through his phone. The last text I received from her before walking down the aisle was a snapshot of crystal blue ocean and her legs in a beach chair. Vacation. Can't wait. Enjoy the wedding, sis. My husband's side filled their rows with cheers and applauding, but my side looked like a murder scene after everyone had gone home. I stood there in my dress, staring at the vacant chairs and pretending my chest wasn't burning. That was the day something within me silently cracked. I did not yell, I did not throw a fit, I was watching, I remembered. And I began keeping receipts, both literal and emotional. 3 months later, the same individuals who had chosen the Maldives over me called with a different tone, pleading with me to fly out for her wedding at a luxurious resort. They expected me to show up, smile pretty, and reprise my role as the forgotten daughter. They had no idea how much I had changed. Before I tell you what my father said that night and what happened after I picked up the microphone at my sister's wedding, tell me what time it is right now and where you are viewing from. I'm curious how far this story about family boundaries and payback will go. I work as an emergency room nurse in Houston, so I'm used to chaos, sirens, alarms, and people yelling instructions over each other. I've been trained to be cool in the face of chaos. But nothing in my career prepared me for the quiet pain you experience when your own family picks a vacation over your wedding. Growing up, I knew my father had a favorite. He owns Carter & Sons Custom Homes, a successful building company with large houses, clientele, and ego. He's the family man at church and in the town, giving lectures about hard work and prioritizing family. At home, family first typically meant Madison first. My 3-year-old younger sister, the golden child with wide eyes and a larger Instagram following, I was the one in charge of honor roll, scholarships, and night shifts at the hospital. She was the fun one. The one father flew to Cabo for her 23rd birthday, assuring me, "You're tough, you don't need all that." When I got engaged, I hoped this time would be different. Dad brought me to a steakhouse for lunch, pulled out a leather checkbook, and casually wrote a large check for wedding expenditures. "You've earned this, Lore," he remarked. "And don't worry, we're blocking off that whole weekend. Nothing's more important than walking you down that aisle." I said to him, I wanted to. For months, I texted my parents and Madison pictures of venues, outfits, and mood boards. My fiancé, Nathan, a firefighter, respectfully inquired in the family group chat about suit colors and rehearsal dinner times. Half the time, no one responded. Madison added a countdown to her Instagram story 3 weeks before the wedding. "In 5 weeks, I'll go on a Maldives bachelorette content trip." I stared at my phone. The dates coincided wonderfully with my wedding weekend. When I confronted my mother about it, she answered, "Oh, honey, it's just a few days, we'll make it work somehow. Don't be dramatic." My father later texted, "We've already paid deposits. I'll fly back in time. Relax." I attempted to relax. I told myself they wouldn't actually do it. The night before the wedding, Nathan and I were in our modest apartment, finalizing last-minute preparations. He was ironing his shirt as I navigated through Pinterest, trying not to cry. A notification appeared on his phone on the coffee table, a sneak peek at a new message in the Carter family group chat. "Do you want me to open that?" he inquired. "I never look in there," I said angrily. "Be my guest." He unlocks his phone, and his expression changes in real time. Confusion, followed by disbelief, and finally anger. "Emily, you should see this," he remarked calmly. A continuous flood of photographs appeared on his screen. My father in a first-class seat, champagne in hand. My mom is wearing a floppy hat. Madison poses with her passport and a note that reads, "When your family chooses tropical vibes over stress, Maldives, here we come. Family first." The timestamp on the boarding photo is 4 hours before my rehearsal dinner. No call, no apologies, just feelings. My heart fell so deeply that I felt physically nauseous. "Maybe it's a layover," I said, looking for an answer. However, a video started to play automatically. Madison squealed. "Next stop, Maldives. Sorry, Emily. We'll FaceTime you from the beach." My father's voice in the background joked, "We'll be there in spirit." Nathan's jaw tightened. "If this were my family doing this to you, what would you tell me?" I didn't respond since we both knew I'd urge him to cut them off. "Tell me honestly, if you saw your fiancé's family literally flying over an ocean instead of driving 25 minutes to your wedding, would you still walk down that aisle hoping they'd show up? Or would you already be planning your exit strategy?" I finished getting ready. ER nurses understand how to operate on autopilot. You can be dying inside and still insert an IV, dial a code, and keep your hands steady. On my wedding day, I applied my own makeup with the same mechanical precision. Mascara, concealer, and lipstick. Ignore the shaking. Ignore the empty text thread from mom. Ignore the unread message from dad that just said, "Signal might be spotty, we'll catch up after." Nathan's mother knocked on the bridal suite door. "Sweetheart, it's time," she whispered, her eyes bright with emotion. I mustered a grin, picked up my bouquet, and proceeded toward the sanctuary doors. The music began, and the doors opened. I stepped outside and immediately noticed it. Nathan's brothers, cousins, and childhood pals were crammed on the left side. They rose to their feet, cheering, whistling, and beaming at him, then me. On my right side, 2 co-workers from the hospital, my college friend, and 5 vacant rows reserved with white cards that read, "Bride's family." All those seats were precisely lined up, gazing back at me like teeth in a mouth that wouldn't speak. My knees nearly buckled. Nathan noticed it, too. His eyes clouded with something between rage and heartbreak. We met at the altar, and he grabbed my hand so tightly that my knuckles ached. "You look incredible," he said quietly. "You and me, that's enough." I nodded since speaking would make me sob. The officiant began the ceremony just as he said, "Who gives this woman to be married?" A huge burst of laughter erupted from the sound system. At first, I assumed it was feedback. Then I heard it clearly, waves in the distance, clinking glasses, and my sister's high-pitched voice. "You guys, look at this water, it's literally unreal." The entire audience turned to face the sound booth at the back. The DJ and the church IT guy were hurriedly fiddling with cables while staring at a phone on speaker. My father in sunglasses, drink in hand, stood on a terrace overlooking blue ocean on the screen, facing the audience due to some careless technology. "Happy wedding day, kiddo," he exclaimed into the phone, unaware that his face was now 25 feet tall on the projection. We're tuning in from the Maldives. We'll celebrate later. When things aren't so crazy here. Show her the beach, Madison. The camera swung around to my sister, who was wearing a bikini and a white cover-up and posing with a mimosa. Vacation can't wait, sis. We'll repost your photos. She giggled, tossing her hair. Somebody in the audience coughed. Somebody else murmured. You've got to be kidding me. I could hear whispering right away. That's her family. They're calling from vacation. Ethan's mother, sitting in the front row, covered her lips with dread. The technician eventually removed the phone from the system, stopping the sound, but the harm had been done. The officiant cleared his throat, evidently agitated. Shall we continue? He inquired gently. I looked at Ethan. His jaw was clenched so tight that I could see the muscle flex. We can stop, he said quietly. We don't have to do this today. No, I replied, surprised both of us. We promised each other, let's just finish this for us. I felt myself separate, hovering over my own body as we exchanged vows. I pledged to love and cherish him. He vowed to stand by me. Except for the 5 empty rows burned into my vision and the afterimage of my father's dumb sunglasses, the room was blurry around the edges. When the officiant finally announced, "You may kiss the bride," the clapping was small and awkward. As we walked back down the aisle, Ethan leaned in and said, I swear to you, Emily, they will never do this to you again. As the guests filed out to the courtyard for photos, I sneaked into a side door, grabbed my phone, and opened the family group chat. The Maldives videos remained, as did screenshots of Madison's Instagram story and a boomerang of my father raising his glass with the remark, when your fam's idea of support is sending good vibes from over the ocean, number family first. I saved every image, video, and caption. I didn't know how yet, but I knew it. One day, there would be a reckoning. If your family humiliated you on your wedding day on a large screen, would you confront them right away or wait, gather evidence, and strike when they least expected it? The reception that followed was lovely for everyone else. Fairy lights, delicious food, Ethan's buddies dancing like idiots, and his cousins making poignant toasts to how he had always looked out for them. Every time someone mentioned family, I felt a slight jolt in my chest. When it was time for the parents' speeches, Ethan's father stepped up, cleared his throat, and said, I didn't get to raise a daughter, but today I feel like we gained one. The audience exclaimed, Oh, Ed. I smiled, but my eyes stung. My side of the microphone remained silent. Between concerts, Ethan and I snuck out for some fresh air. We stood just outside the venue, behind a string of lights, with the faint sound of laughter echoing behind us. You okay? He inquired. I laughed, but there was nothing funny about it. My father literally photobombed my wedding from another continent. What do you think? He reached into his inside pocket and took out his phone. You should also see this, he continued. Madison sent a photo to her public Instagram account less than an hour after we exchanged our vows. My family in swimwear, gathered around a candlelight table on the beach. My father is in the center, holding up a glass of champagne. The description read, To my favorite girl finally getting her dream trip Maldives with the best fam on earth. Number family first, number wouldn't miss it for the world. The timestamp coincided almost exactly with when Ethan and I exchanged rings. I gazed at the screen until it became blurry. Wouldn't miss it for the world, I repeated, my voice lifeless. When I was a kid, my father always missed my school plays, my nursing school graduation, and my first apartment move-in, with the same line. We'll celebrate later, Lore, you know I'm busy. I'm done giving benefit of the doubt. I grumbled. They made their decision. Ethan nodded. Then we make ours. We build our own family. You, me, whoever respects us. At that point, something inside me cemented. Anger cooled into something sharper and crisper. Boundaries and repercussions. I don't want to scream at them, I said. I want them to experience what it's like to be on the outside looking in for once. The next day, my phone was inundated with texts. She said, Sweetheart, the Wi-Fi was terrible. We're so sorry we couldn't be there. The live call was our way of trying. My older brother, you're making a big deal out of nothing. We told you about this trip. Don't ruin your marriage over one weekend. Madison's mom, sis, it was just timing. You know I love you. Please don't be mad we watched the replay. You looked gorge. I let them all read while I worked. For the first time in my life, stillness was mine. Weeks have passed. My job kept me busy. Ethan and I settled into our married life. Shared grocery lists, washing routines, late-night Netflix, and his turnout gear drying on the shower rod. Every now and then, I would see one of my father's advertisements on local television. Carter and Sons build houses and families. I would sneer and mute it. Then, one Tuesday night, around 7 weeks after the wedding, Ethan went into the living room with his laptop open, a peculiar expression on his face. Len, you should see this, he urged again, and the statement became a recurring theme throughout our marriage. On the screen came an internal work email that had definitely been forwarded to him anonymously. It was addressed to the whole Carter and Sons staff. It stated at the bottom that it had been forwarded anonymously. The body of the email was from my father to his accountant and was dated 5 days before my wedding. Maldives retreat charge. Please classify this under client development. Staff retreat. We'll write it off this quarter. And yes, pull from the discretionary budget we set aside instead of Emily's wedding contribution. I'll make it up to her later. It made me sick. That check he'd signed me at the steakhouse, the "you've earned this," he actually diverted to pay for his island getaway. It wasn't simply emotional neglect anymore. It was financial and purposeful. So, he took back your wedding money to pay for the trip he chose over your wedding, Ethan remarked with a grumble. And then called you dramatic for being hurt. I nodded, my teeth gritted. He made my wedding into a tax write-off. That night, I opened a folder on my laptop and began dragging everything inside. Screenshots of texts, videos from the ceremony, Madison's posts, and the email Ethan just showed me. I titled the folder Family First Evidence. For the first time, this did not feel like petty scorekeeping, it felt like a case file. People frequently say, forgive and forget. But tell me, when someone makes your most significant day, a line item on their expenditure report, is forgetting truly wise, or is it simply letting them know there will be no consequences? Nearly 3 months after the wedding, on a calm Sunday morning, my phone vibrated with a video call from my mother. I nearly declined out of habit, but curiosity got the best of me. I responded, and her face filled the screen. Full makeup, soft lighting, and that rehearsed mom grin I recognized after years of smoothing things out for my father. Hi, honey, she said too pleasantly. Do you have a minute? Your dad and Madison are also here. My chest clenched. What's going on? I inquired. The camera zoomed out. My father waved from the living room couch, wearing a shirt with his company emblem. Madison sat cross-legged on the rug in a white romper, her ring shining brightly on her finger. Surprise! She exclaimed, raising her left hand. I'm engaged. I looked at the screen. Already? I inquired. She was casually dating a guy named Ryan when she went to the Maldives. I didn't know they were serious. He proposed on the same beach where we watched your ceremony replay, she remarked, as if it were emotional rather than twisted. It was like full circle. We have some exciting news. My father cut in. We're planning the wedding in the Maldives, same resort, same overwater villas, a true destination celebration. And of course, everyone agreed. It wouldn't be complete without you and Nathan, my mother said, her smile wobbling. We really want to make things right, sweetheart, she told me. This will be our chance to all be together, okay? I almost laughed. The same resort. They toasted my sister while I grieved in a church hallway. Who's paying? I inquired honestly. They all blinked. Well, we're covering most of it, my father answered. You and Nathan would just need flights. Moreover, we thought it would be symbolic to use the original wedding budget we set aside, like sharing it between you girls. Fair, right? I was enraged. They had already spent that money on their first vacation. They were now planning to rebrand it as generosity, as if it still existed. We're sending you the official invite video, Madison chipped in, unaware. We want you to do a speech, Emily. Like big sister blessing energy. It'll be so cute for the videos. The official invitation arrived after we hung up. A beautifully created montage of drone pictures over turquoise ocean, slow motion footage of Madison and Ryan smiling in hammocks, voiceover words on second chances, and family bonds unbreakable by distance. The final frame, Madison and Ryan, Maldives, save the date, with special guest of honor, maid of honor, and big sister Emily. I nearly shattered my phone. Nathan returned home from a shift and discovered me lounging on the couch. Madison's face was frozen in a beautiful influencer smile as the video paused in the middle shot. So, he replied, dropping his keys into the basin. I'm guessing you got the invite. I nodded. They want me to bless her marriage in the same place they toasted her for skipping mine. Using the same money he took from my wedding to pay for their first vacation. Nathan sat alongside me and whispered, we don't have to go. I stared at the screen for a long time. No. I said softly, we do. He scowled. We do. I've let them write my story for 31 years. I responded, the overlooked kid, the understanding one, the nurse who gets it when they're busy. At my wedding, they showed the world exactly who they are, and I swallowed it. If I don't confront this, they'll keep going as if nothing happened. They'll call anyone who pushes back ungrateful. They'll talk about family while using people as props. I opened my laptop, clicked into the Family First Evidence folder, and began organizing it into subfolders. Wedding, Maldivian trip, money, and public image. Nathan remained mute while watching. What are you doing? He finally inquired. They want projection screens and speeches. I told them, I'm going to give them exactly that. I purchased 2 economy tickets with our own funds. I booked us into a modest accommodation at the resort rather than one of the overwater villas intended for the immediate family. I got a bright red outfit, which made me feel like a warning sign. I also emailed the resort's event coordinator, presenting myself as the bride's sister and maid of honor, and asked if I could upload a special surprise tribute film to their AV system the day before the wedding. She responded within hours. Of course, we enjoy surprises, simply bring it on a USB. I called the file Family First, Tribute, Final, MPP4, and grinned for the first time in weeks. If your family invited you to the same area where they humiliated you, given you a microphone, and granted you access to the projector, would you remain silent or finally click play? The Maldives is as lovely as Instagram portrays it, and it's just as weird to arrive for a revenge mission rather than a honeymoon. Nathan gripped my hand as our seaplane flew over water that appeared to have been photoshopped. Last chance to back out, he remarked. We can tell them you got sick and spend the week lying on the beach and ignoring everyone. I've been sick for months, I explained. This is me getting better. My relatives waited on the resort pier like a welcoming committee. My father wore linen, my mother wore a floral maxi dress, and Madison wore a white two-piece set that looked like she was auditioning for a bridal magazine. Ryan stood behind her, tall, gorgeous, and polite, clearly still enthralled by the beautiful family tale he had been offered. Emily, my mother shouted, holding me as if we hadn't talked in weeks of stilted surface-level texts. I hugged her back firmly. You look great, my father replied, giving me a side hug and rubbing my shoulder as if I had just signed a contract. Up close, I noticed more gray in his hair and small creases around his eyes, but he maintained the same professional charm. We're really glad you came, kiddo. This means a lot. Does it? I asked him. My voice smiled. His smile flashed, but remained fixed. Madison bounced on her toes. Lore, that dress is on fire, she exclaimed. You're going to pop on camera. I told the videographer. You're like our emotional anchor. You know, big sister, old wounds healing. All that old wounds, I said again. Sure. The resort staff offered us chilled towels and coconut water. We checked into our humble room, which was still nicer than anything I'd stayed in previously but nothing compared to the overwater castles I could see from our window. My parents and Madison were there, of course, to post room tours that evening. Before supper, I met with the event coordinator in the reception hall, a glass-walled pavilion that overlooked the ocean and would host the wedding and reception. Here's the USB, I said, passing it along. It's a mashup of childhood clips, photos, and some messages from people back home. Only one of those descriptions was technically true. Perfect, she remarked, plugging it into the laptop that was connected to the projector. We'll cue it when you start your speech, just nod at the DJ when you're ready. She pressed play to preview the file. The opening frames featured innocent childhood images of Madison and myself in matching pajamas, as well as clips supplied by my mother over the years, all set to calm music. I inserted these on purpose to give everyone a false sense of security. Looks great, the coordinator said, stopping it before it got to the less attractive material. Madison's ceremony on the balcony overlooking the ocean resembled a Pinterest board come to reality. White flowers, gauzy draperies wafting in the breeze, guests dressed in pastels, and fashionable sunglasses. My father carried her down the aisle, smiling like the father of the year, while drones hovered overhead, catching every angle. I felt Nathan's hand in mine, which grounded me. During the vows, I watched Madison promise to always be there for Ryan, trying not to cringe at the absurdity. After they kissed and everyone flung flower petals, we went inside the pavilion for the celebration. Tables sparkled with glassware and candles. A big screen behind the sweetheart table displayed a presentation of Madison and Ryan's engagement photos. Yes, many people went on that initial Maldives vacation. Every slide served as a reminder of where they had been on the day I married. At our table, a few others made small talk. So, Emily, what are you doing back home? One of Ryan's family inquired. I'm an ER nurse. I explained. I patch people up when the people who were supposed to take care of them don't. The cousin laughed politely, not really understanding the innuendo. My mother drifted past, caressing my shoulder. Sweetheart, after dinner you'll go right before your father's toast, she informed me. Softball things, okay? This is a happy day. I smiled faintly. I'll speak from the heart, I pledged. Dinner came to a close. The DJ announced, and now, a special speech from our maid of honor, the bride's big sister, Emily. There was applause. Madison beamed at me from her seat, her eyes already glistening, anticipating an emotional, forgiving monologue that she could record for her fans. I adjusted my red dress, and moved to the center of the dance floor. The projector behind me changed from the generic slideshow to a black screen, waiting for me to nod. I gazed around at the sea of faces, my parents' friends, my father's business partners, Ryan's family, resort employees with trays in hand. I took the mic. Hi everyone, I said, my voice remarkably steady. For those who don't know me, I'm Emily, the older sister. I'm also the one person in this room who's seen Madison and my parents when the cameras aren't rolling. A few giggles ensue. Madison laughed nervously. First and foremost, Madison, you look stunning, I added. And Ryan, you seem like a genuinely good guy. That's why I feel like it would be unfair not to tell you the full story of how we got here. The surroundings changed. Chairs creaked. My dad's smile began to resemble a scowl. I nodded discreetly to the DJ. The screen behind me sprung to life. Childhood photographs surfaced. Little Madison is cake-covered. I pushed her on a swing. We grew up in a house where the words family first were pretty much the motto, I explained over the images. At least that's what we told everyone. The montage shifted on the screen. A shot of the empty bride's family rows at my wedding. Guests in the front, with a stark void behind them. Gasps echoed throughout the room. 3 months ago. I continued, I married my best friend in Houston. You won't see those photos in these slideshows because my family wasn't present. The next clip played automatically. The video of my father and Madison on our church's giant screen, him wearing sunglasses and her in a bikini, yelling cheerful greetings from the Maldives. Their voices boomed through the pavilion's speakers. Happy wedding day, kiddo. We'll celebrate later. Vacation can't wait, sis. The video shows laughter. Nobody in the room was laughing now. I turned slightly to see my parents' faces. My mother's hand was covering her mouth. Madison was frozen, her eyes wide, and her mascara was already smudging. My father had gone pale under his tan. While my husband and I exchanged vows in front of 5 empty rows, I said, my family was here at this very resort, turning our absence into content. On the next slide, Madison's number, family first number, wouldn't miss it for the world, post popped up on the screen. Some of my father's business partners leaned forward and squinted. One whispered something to another while shaking his head. Then came the email. I had redacted the accountant's name but left my father's intact. The projector focused on the key lines as I read them aloud. Please classify this under client development, staff retreat. We'll write it off this quarter. And yes, pull from the discretionary budget we set aside instead of Emily's wedding contribution. I'll make it up to her later. You might have heard a fork drop. So, Ryan, I said, turning to my new brother-in-law, when they talk about family first, understand what that has actually meant. It meant turning my wedding into a tax write-off. It meant toasting your fiancé on a beach while telling me I was dramatic for being hurt. My father jumped to his feet. Emily, that's enough, he said, his voice low but strong. Turn that off. I raised my hand. You've had your image for decades, Dad. Your ads, your speeches, your family man brand. Tonight, we're just balancing the story. The slideshow behind me changed to a split screen. On one side, one of his local television commercials. In a hard hat, he tells Carter and Sons, family isn't just a word, it's our foundation. On the other side, a zoomed-in screen capture of the line item, Maldives retreat is classified as client development and charged to the family wedding budget. Some guests stood up, murmuring to one another. One of his most important clients, a local developer, stared at the screen, lips pressed together in a thin line. You're trying to ruin me, my father muttered, due to a scheduling conflict. I laughed sharply. This isn't about scheduling. This is about a pattern of you choosing whatever makes you look good over what actually matters. It's about you telling me my pain was nothing while you literally cashed out my wedding. Madison finally discovered her voice. Emily, this is my wedding, she exclaimed. You're embarrassing me. I looked at her, terrified, humiliated, and still not understanding what she'd done wrong. I'm not doing anything, Madison, I replied softly. I'm just pressing play. For a long second, the room was silent, balanced on a knife's edge. Ryan slowly rose from his seat at the head table. He looked from the screen to Madison, then to my parents, and finally back at me. Is this true? He asked, his voice low but steady. Did you really skip her wedding to come here and pay for it with her money? My father inquired. It's more complicated than it's not, I mentioned. You got the receipts, Ryan? Literally. Madison reaches for his arm. Baby, it was just timing. Okay, we talked about it, remember? They had it handled at home, and I needed content. She paused in mid-sentence, realizing how it sounded out loud. Ryan pulled his arm back slowly. You told me your sister understood, he said. That she was fine with it, that she was cool. His gaze slid to me. I held his eyes. I spent my wedding day pretending I was fine so they wouldn't call me ungrateful. I said. I wasn't fine. The developer client I'd noticed earlier raised his voice from his table. Robert, is that your company card on that email? He asked. My dad's jaw clenched. This is a personal matter, he said. We should discuss this privately. You made it public when you used company funds and then bragged about family values in your marketing, the man replied. We'll be in touch when we get back to Houston. He stood up, signaled to his wife, and walked out. 2 other men I recognized from my dad's TV ads followed. My dad's shoulders sagged, his mask slipping for the first time in my life. Emily, please, my mom said, tears streaming now. We can fix this. Turn it off, we'll talk later. I swallowed hard. There was a part of me, the conditioned child, that wanted to obey, to smooth it over, to reassure her. But then I remembered those empty chairs, the sound of my sister's voice over my vows, the email line about, I'll make it up to her later. I raised the mic one last time. Here's the thing, I said quietly, voice carrying in the stunned hall. For years, I told myself that blood automatically meant loyalty, that I should be grateful for whatever crumbs of attention I got, that setting boundaries was disrespectful. But ordinary people sitting in my ER at 3 inches the morning have taught me more about real family than you have, the ones who show up. The ones who sit all night in plastic chairs just to be there when someone wakes up. Family isn't who looks good in pictures. It's who stands next to you when there's nothing to post. I turned to Madison. I don't hate you, I said. I just refuse to keep pretending this dynamic is normal. One day, if you have a daughter, I hope you remember what it felt like seeing those empty chairs and choose differently. Then to my parents, you chose a vacation over me. You chose a write-off over my wedding. You chose optics over honesty. Tonight, I chose myself. I handed the mic back to the DJ. You can stop the video now, I told him. He did. The screen faded to black. Nathan was already standing by the door when I walked off the dance floor. We didn't run. We just left. No dramatic storming out. No slammed doors. Just two people walking away from a fire we hadn't started, but had finally stopped pretending wasn't burning. In the hallway outside, he took my face in his hands. I am so proud of you, he said. I exhaled, shaking. I feel like I just ripped out my own roots, I whispered. Maybe, he said, but now there's room for new ones. Over the next week, the fallout spread fast. By the time we landed back in Houston, 3 of my dad's biggest clients had pulled out. There were rumors of an internal audit. His family man reputation took a hit when someone, definitely not me, but someone, sent a clipped version of the Maldives call and the empty chairs photo to a local reporter who'd once done a feature on his values-driven leadership. At first, my parents called constantly, long voicemails, apologies mixed with accusations. You blindsided us. You humiliated us. You ruined your sister's big day. Then the calls slowed. Then they stopped. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no group hug, just silence. And honestly, for the first time, the silence felt like peace, not punishment. I doubled down on therapy, on my marriage, on friendships that had quietly held me up this whole time. Coworkers who'd sat in those chairs at my wedding. Nathan's mom who called every Sunday just to chat. Neighbors who brought over casseroles when we both had night shifts. Slowly, I built what I'd wanted all along. A circle of people who showed up because they cared, not because a camera was rolling. People in the comments might say, you went too far. You shouldn't air family business in public. Maybe they're right for their families, but for mine, public image was the weapon they'd used for years. All I did was stop cooperating. If you're listening to this and you've been told you're too sensitive for wanting basic respect or dramatic for being hurt when people let you down, here's what I learned the hard way. Boundaries are not betrayal. You are allowed to say, this is not okay, even to the people who raised you. You're allowed to walk away from family that only shows up when it benefits them. You're allowed to build a life with people who choose you on purpose. I didn't get the father of the bride moment I'd pictured. I got something else instead. The realization that my worth is not up for a family vote, so now I'm curious. I raised my wife's children as my own, but when they disrespected me, I stopped providing and left. Am I the asshole? I've always believed in a few fundamental principles. Working hard for what you have, accepting responsibility for your actions, and remaining loyal to those you care about. I also learned the hard way that loving the wrong people can lead to serious problems. This entire story is about how my views were put to the test, and how everything I thought I understood about family came crumbling down. To be honest, this isn't a happy story. It's about being taken advantage of, being exploited, and finally recognizing when enough is enough. I am not going to sugarcoat anything. I'm going to tell you exactly how it happened because I believe it's vital to be honest about these things. We often hear of happy endings, but sometimes the ending is simply an ending. And sometimes that's fine. It is actually necessary. I'm not trying to be a saint here. I made mistakes. I was perhaps very trusting and inclined to believe in the best in others. I ignored certain red signs and paid the consequences. However, I also learned a lot. So, how did it all begin? It began with a woman named Amelia. She was widowed. Her husband, a military officer, had died. She had 2 young children, a boy named Daniel, who was about 4 years old and full of energy, and a baby girl named Mia, who was just learning to walk. I met them through a mutual friend, and I could tell immediately away that Amelia was struggling. She wasn't just sad, though she certainly was. It was more than that. She was totally fatigued, visibly weary. You could see it in the way she held herself, the dark circles under her eyes, and the way she appeared to be running on fumes. It wasn't just I'm tired tiredness, it was a deep, bone-weary exhaustion caused by carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. I didn't intervene because I felt obligated or anything. It was not some sort of knight in shining armor complex. It was only that I actually saw her. I observed her struggle and wanted to help. I wanted to make things a little simpler for her and the children. I had a genuine desire to provide some stability and support in their lives. I began by helping out in small ways, such as offering to keep the kids so she could take a nap or running errands. However, it quickly became more. I found myself yearning to be a father figure for those children. Their father had passed away, and I felt confident that I could fill in for him, not to replace him, of course, but to provide them with the love and support that every child needs. I suppose you could say I was contrasting my own values, hard labor, responsibility, and loyalty, with the circumstances they were in. I wanted to give them what their father couldn't, not because I had to, but because I really wanted to. It felt right. It felt like the beginning of something positive, something real. And for a long time, it was okay. I poured myself into it. I worked long hours not only to pay the bills, but also to ensure that those children had everything they required. A decent school, great clothes, a pleasant home, lots of food on the table, all of it. I prioritized their needs before my own. I wasn't simply attempting to meet their basic needs. I also wanted to alleviate any sense of loss they may have had because their father was not present. I wanted to fill the vacuum and make them feel safe and cherished. It wasn't all about the material goods, however. I was also there for them emotionally. I attended every single school event, soccer game, and play. I cheered the loudest. I was their biggest fan. I planned birthday parties, family vacations, and did all of the dad things. They answered. They loved me back. They addressed me as Dad, rather than Thomas. And you know what? I believed it, I actually did. I felt like I was the luckiest man alive. I believed I had established a genuine loving family. I was so caught up in the idea, in the desire for it to be true, that I failed to notice the cracks that were beginning to appear. I was so intent on creating the perfect photo that I ignored the warning indications. Looking back, I realized that I was building on a foundation that was not as firm as I had assumed. But at the moment I was fully committed. I invested my heart and soul. I was determined to make this work and be the greatest father figure I could be. I put everything I had into it, and for a while, it appeared to be paying off. We had rituals, conventions, and inside jokes. We were a family. I felt confident that emotion was what kept me going. The initial signals of problems were minor, almost insignificant. A few comments from the youngsters, some backtalk, and a roll of the eyes here and there. Nothing significant. Nothing unusual for children growing up. I brushed it off. I told myself that was just standard teenage behavior, a phase they were passing through. I didn't want to perceive it as more than that. I recall Daniel, he must have been around 13 or 14, making a nasty remark about how I wasn't cool because I wouldn't let him stay out late. Mia, who was a few years younger, responded with a similarly nasty remark. It stung a little, but I laughed it off. I told myself they were only testing boundaries and pushing limits, so as all teens do. As the children grew older, the disdain became more obvious. By the age of 17, Daniel had become a full-fledged teenager. He began ignoring curfews, dismissing any advice I offered, and generally acting as if he was entitled to do whatever he wanted. It was typical teenage rebellion, but it felt different. Sharper, somehow. There was a meanness that I couldn't ignore. Mia, who was around 14 at the time, began copying her brother's conduct. She would roll her eyes at me, ignore my orders, and dismiss any worries I expressed. They established a united front against me, demonstrating that they did not respect my authority. Or me, for that matter. It felt like they were ganging up on me, seeing how far they could push me. Amelia's reply, or lack thereof, exacerbated the situation. She declined to intervene, she would not back me up. She'd just sit there, generally looking at her phone, pretending not to notice what was going on. Sometimes she would even gently undermine me. Maybe she'd appear to be distracted by her phone or sigh, as if I was being unreasonable. It wasn't simply passive, she seemed to actively encourage their actions. She'd make excuses for them. Oh, they're just tired. They're going through a phase, or we need to keep the peace. There was always something. However, it was actually a pattern of supporting their disdain. She was allowing them to get away with it, undermining my authority and making me feel more lonely. I started to feel like I was the only one who cared about setting boundaries and teaching them what was right and wrong. I began to mistrust Amelia's motives. Was she truly this oblivious, or was she purposely undermining me? I received my first true wake-up call about this time, but I still didn't completely understand what was going on. The true breaking point, when everything began to fall apart, occurred one night. Daniel arrived home much beyond his curfew. I'm talking hours later, and he hadn't called, texted, or anything. I was scared sick, of course, but when he eventually walked in, he acted as if it was nothing. I asked him calmly where he had been, Just a simple question to ensure accountability. He did not even look at me. He simply stated, "Relax, I'm not a kid." That was it. There was no apology or explanation, just a flippant brush off. And then he shouted, "You're not my real dad. Stop acting like you own me." All those years of love, care, and support were flung back in my face. It felt like a punch in the belly. Mia, who was standing there, chipped in. "Yeah, you're just some guy mom married." As if all the years we'd spent together and the experiences we'd shared were meaningless. Something inside me has just broken. It wasn't anger, not yet, but rather a deep sense of disillusionment. And the worst part? Amelia did not say anything. She just stood there silently. Her silence represented the ultimate betrayal. It proved all I had suspected, that I was nothing more than a convenience to them, a provider, someone to handle the things their true father couldn't. It was the defining moment for me, when I learned that the family I believed I had created was a fiction. It was not long after the first episode that it occurred again. This time, it was Mia. She had made a mess in the kitchen, so I asked her to clean it up. Simple enough, right? Basic responsibilities. But instead, she simply looked at me and said, "Why don't you do it? It's your house, isn't it?" That stung. It wasn't just the contempt, it was how she said it, as if I were a servant whose sole function was to clean up after them. It accentuated my outsider status, reducing me to little more than a provider and cleaner. It was an intentional attempt to make me feel insignificant. And then, as if on cue, Daniel added the identical line. "You're not even our real dad." It was as if they were tag-teaming me, reaffirming their rejection and ensuring I understood my place, or lack thereof, in their lives. But this time, Amelia's reply sealed the deal. She didn't yell or become irritated. She just looked at me nonchalantly, not glancing up from her phone, and remarked, "They have a point, Thomas. Maybe you should back off." That was all. That was the moment I realized it was finished. It was no longer just the children's disdain. Amelia had explicitly agreed with them. She was siding with them against me, the guy who had spent years caring for them. It wasn't a moment of rage or even pain, not really. It was a moment of clarity. I eventually realized I was finished. There was no going back. This was not a family. It was a fake, and I was finally ready to leave. It was a gentle epiphany, a peaceful acceptance of the fact. I was no longer striving to hang on to something that was not genuine. I was ready to let go, so I did something I never imagined I would do. I paused. I stopped giving, caring, and trying. It wasn't an impulsive decision. It was a calculated, thoughtful one. I've just withdrawn. I stopped providing for them, no more rides, allowances, protection, guidance, or worry. I let them face the repercussions of their behavior. It was a total 180 from the way I had been for years. I was always there for them, no matter what. Now I was gone. I'm not going to lie, it stung. It contradicted every instinct I had. I had committed so much of myself in this family, and it was really terrible to simply walk away. But I knew it was important. I needed to defend myself. I knew it would not be easy. I knew they would react and try to push back. But I was prepared for it. I'd hit my limit. I gave them everything I had, and they threw it back at me. I was finished being the doormat. At first, they laughed. They insulted me, made caustic remarks, and smirked whenever I passed by. They believed they had won. They assumed they didn't need me. They were relying on Amelia to deliver all I was providing. They were wrong. They'd make these tiny jabs, copying my directions and mocking the way I tried to set boundaries. They'd exclaim, "Oh, are we breaking the rules?" while rolling their eyes and smirking at each other. It was as if they were attempting to provoke me, to elicit a reaction from me. Oh, Amelia made sure to pick up my slack. She paid for their small shopping trips and ensured that their weekends were still full with fast food and excessive spending. She kept them comfortable, smug, and convinced them they didn't need me. But I knew it would not last. I knew Amelia had few resources. She did not have the same salary as I did. She couldn't keep up that kind of spending indefinitely. So I stayed quiet. I let them have fun. I let them think they could get away with it. I knew the reality check was coming. I didn't participate. I did not argue. I did not react. I simply observed calmly, waiting for the inevitable. It was a strange kind of patience, formed by the conviction that I was correct. I knew their confidence was based on a flimsy foundation that would soon disintegrate. I simply had to wait it out. It was a waiting game. Then, gradually but certainly, things began to alter. Shopping outings became less regular. Fast food trips became fewer and farther between. New garments have ceased emerging. Small changes at first, but visible. Then more problems began to surface. School expenses became an issue. Daniel got into some difficulty at school, and Amelia wasn't sure how to handle it. Mia smashed her phone and had no money to repair it. I remember the first time Daniel missed his school transportation. He'd always taken it for granted, rarely trying to express gratitude. Now he was alone. He had to run for the bus, and from what I've heard, he barely made it, huffing and puffing, absolutely out of breath. It's a minor detail, but it was symbolic. It was the first noticeable break in their comfy world. And I'll confess it. I felt a sense of satisfaction, not joy, precisely, but a quiet vindication. I knew what it was like to strive and work for everything you had. I recall when I was younger and had to work hard to make ends meet. They, on the other hand, have always received everything. Naturally, I said nothing. I just watched. I could see Mia's frustration when she learned her broken phone would not be magically replaced. I overheard her complain to Amelia, as well as Amelia's increasingly feeble justifications. She was running out of money and realized she couldn't offer everything I had. That following day, Mia had a major breakdown, complaining about how unfair it was that she couldn't have her phone repaired. Amelia finally stated, just above a whisper, that she didn't have the money right now. It was a minor admission, but a crucial one. It was the first time she had openly acknowledged her limited resources. It was the beginning of the end for their denial. The truth of their situation began to seep in. They were beginning to realize that their privileged existence was dependent on me, the person they had so easily discarded and despised. The free ride was ended, and they were beginning to feel the bumps in the road. It was a brutal but necessary awakening. My absence was making itself felt. Not long after the phone incident, Amelia confronted me. Of course, she was upset. She accused me of being childish and disregarding my obligations. That word, responsibilities, stayed with me. It indicated how she saw me, not as a partner, not as a father figure, but as someone with commitments to meet, a provider, a walking ATM. She kept blaming me for everything that was going wrong. She felt I was abandoning them, being selfish, and not acting like a man. She tried to make me feel guilty, as if I were the terrible guy. It was all a projection, of course. She was projecting her own failings onto me. I let her rant. I let her say everything, and when she paused for breath, I asked her a simple question. I questioned her why she had never defended me, and why she had always supported the children, even when they were disrespectful. I questioned her why she had let them treat me the way they did. And that is when it happened. That's when the truth eventually emerged. She sneered, and I mean sneered, and said, "Because I agree with them, Thomas. You were never really their father." It felt like a slap in the face, but it also confirmed everything I had assumed. But it did not end there. She went further. She actually stated that she had warned the kids not to let me manage them. "I told them not to let you control them," she claimed. "I raised them alone before you, and I can do it again." That was the real kicker. It was not simply passive passivity, it was deliberate long-term undermining. She had intentionally promoted their disdain and poisoned their minds against me. Daniel and Mia were standing in the corridor, arms crossed, with smug expressions on their faces. It seemed like they were enjoying the show. At that point, I thought, this is it. This is who they really are. Not the sweet, innocent children I had tried to love and care for, but spoiled, entitled brats, enabled by their manipulative mother. Despite the hurt and betrayal, I felt relieved. It was over. The charade was over. I had an answer. There was no ambiguity and no space for doubt. I knew without a doubt that I had made the right decision by walking away. The reality was unpleasant, but also liberating. I was finally free. But things worsened before they improved. Amelia's rage, combined with their own sense of entitlement, drove the kids to act out even more. It began with tiny things. My personal possessions would disappear. Then some crucial work files vanished from my computer. I began to suspect they were teasing me, but I had no proof. The situation then escalated. One morning, I discovered my car had been keyed, a long, deep mark along the side. That's when I realized I needed to do something. I discreetly installed security cameras inside and outside the home. I didn't tell anyone, including Amelia. I only wanted to gather proof, and I succeeded. A few days later, I caught Daniel and Mia on video in my closet. They were laughing, ripping up my garments and destroying them with scissors. It was purposeful vandalism. I did not challenge them. I did not yell or scream. I just stayed quiet. I documented everything. I've saved the video clip. I took pictures of the damage. I gathered all of the menacing texts they'd sent me, evidence of their growing anger. I was playing along, letting them believe they were winning while secretly planning my departure. I realized I had to defend myself, not just emotionally, but legally. I knew things were going to get bad, so I wanted to be prepared. I was preparing my case, accumulating the ammunition I'd need to fight back if necessary. It was a sad and pathetic scenario, but I was resolved to handle it with as much respect and calm as I could. I was not going to come down to their level. I was going to be smart, strategic, and quiet. The next step was to see a lawyer. I described the problem and showed him all of the proof I had obtained. He listened quietly, nodding occasionally, and when I finished, he told me I had a solid case. We discussed divorce, and he even offered a restraining order due to the children's growing animosity. I also filed a police report regarding the property damage. It felt strange to report my stepchildren to the police, but I knew it was necessary. I needed to keep an official record of their actions to protect myself from any accusations or legal challenges. It was another step in the process of breaking relationships and freeing myself from this toxic environment. Then, one afternoon, while Amelia and the children were gone, I packed a bag. I didn't take much, just the necessities, the things that were most important to me. I left everything else behind, including the furniture, appliances, and material possessions I had accumulated over the years. They weren't important. What was crucial was my freedom and peace of mind. I left an envelope on the kitchen countertop. The divorce papers were inside, along with copies of all supporting documentation, such as the police report, images of the damage, and screenshots of the threatening texts. It was a formal act of separation. There was no going back. I went out of the house and did not look back. I got into my car, the one with the long scrape on the side, and drove away. I didn't have a plan, really. I just knew I needed to get out of the toxic environment I was living in. The last phase was financial. I stopped all joint accounts and denied Amelia access to my assets. It was a harsh move, I admit, but it was necessary. I had to limit her capacity to continue enabling the children's entitled behavior. I needed to make it apparent that the gravy train had halted. It was the final cut of ties, the ultimate act of departure. It was over. Amelia reacted as one could have imagined. She contacted me several times, leaving furious voicemails accusing me of being a coward, abandoning them, and being a bad person. She claimed she could live without me, that she didn't want my money, and that she would be better off without me. It was just bluster, of course. She was in denial and refused to acknowledge the reality of the situation. I did not return her calls. I did not react to her texts. I've just blocked her number. I declined to engage in additional dispute. I had spoken my piece. I'd taken my stand, and I was finished. I needed to focus on my own well-being and create a new life for myself. Then the children began messaging me. At first, they sent the same careless, arrogant messages they had always sent, but the tone gradually shifted. They began to sound apprehensive and even sorry. They apologized for their actions, admitting that things were challenging, and that they were struggling without my help. Finally, I got a message from Mia, the younger one. It was only 3 words. I miss you. It was a big change, but it was too late. The damage was done. The trust was broken. I couldn't return, even if I wanted to. I stayed mute. I did not respond. I recognized their regret, but I remained solid in my decision. I'd learned a harsh lesson and was determined not to make the same mistakes again. I gave them everything I had, and they threw it back at me. I was finished. My silence was my response. It was my way of saying, you made your choice, and now you have to live with the consequences. So, that is my story. It's not pretty, but it's genuine, and it taught me some essential things. The most important rule is to never allow others to take you for granted. Never beg for respect. Never waste your energy on individuals who do not appreciate you. And if you feel used or insulted, move away. Do not hesitate. Do not look back. It's a difficult lesson to learn and even more difficult to apply, but it's necessary for your own well-being and self-respect. You deserve to be treated with kindness, respect, and love. And if you don't get it, you have the right, or obligation to walk away. Some individuals only recognize your worth after you're gone, and by then, it's too late. It's a terrible truth, but it is nonetheless a truth. Do not wait for them to recognize your worth. Know your worth and act appropriately. It is not about selfishness, it is about self-awareness. It is about protecting your heart, mind, and soul. Thank you for reading. I hope my story can help someone out there who is going through something similar. Remember that you are not alone, and you deserve to be happy. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. Choose yourself. My mother manipulated my fiancé into cheating with my brother. I exposed their lies, and now they're paying the price. My name is Stephen, 31, and I've been with my fiancée Lynn, 28 for 2 years. We've been engaged for 6 months. My younger brother Wesley, 29, lives around 15 minutes from us. Our mother, Nancy, 55, has always been intense, but she has recently been acting strangely with Lynn. It began with Mom making odd comments about Wesley's gym success or how some women simply need a more physically present male. I work 50 to 60 hours per week to provide for our future, and Wesley works as a personal trainer. Nothing wrong with it, but Mom treats him like he's a Greek god. Last month, I noticed Lynn acting differently during family dinners, more silent and checking her phone more frequently. I dismissed it as wedding planning stress. Things went horribly wrong yesterday. Mom invited Lynn over to discuss wedding plans while I was supposed to be at work. My crew finished early, so I decided to surprise them. I drove up to Mom's house and pushed open the window. I overheard everything. Mom was in full manipulation mode. Lynn, honey, I'm telling you this because I care. Stephen's just like his father, always working, never home. Wesley could give you the attention you deserve. He's asked about you, you know. He says he sees how lonely you are. Lynn's response made my blood turn cold. Nancy, I don't know. Stephen's been distant lately. Mom intervened. He's the stronger man. You need a real husband. Someone who will be there, not just provide a paycheck. Wesley could give you that passionate life you deserve. I stood frozen. Lynn then stated something that shocked me. Wesley has been texting me, nothing inappropriate. That was when I walked in. The expressions on their faces. Mom had the guts to smile as if she were doing me a favor. Lynn became white like a sheet. I did not yell. I did not need to. I simply looked at Mom and said, "So this is what wedding planning looks like?" Mom straightened up, feeling righteous. Someone had to say something. You're never home, always at work. Wesley, I cut her off. Wesley this, Wesley that. Really funny how you never mentioned the 3 failed relationships he's had this year alone. Lynn attempted to explain. Stephen, it's not what you think. Let me see your phone, I requested. There is no more sound. If nothing is inappropriate, show me the texts. She gripped her phone closer. Mom started screaming about how I'm being controlling, how I don't trust Lynn, and how Wesley would never demand to see someone's phone. Rich, coming from the lady who reads her father's emails just to make sure. I walked out. Lynn followed me to the driveway, crying about how confused she was and how her mother had gotten into her head. She vowed to delete Wesley's phone number, as if it mattered nothing. I got home to find 6 missed calls from Wesley. He texted me, "We need to talk, bro." We sure do. Mom has been blowing up my phone all day. Obviously, being paranoid is costing me a nice woman. Dad also called, attempting to maintain the status quo as usual. You know how your mother gets, son? She means well. Means well? She is actively attempting to set up my brother with my fiancé, and Lynn is sleeping in the guest room, claiming she wants space to ponder. Funny how that works. What is the worst part? My friend Patrick informed me that Wesley had been turning up at the coffee shop near Lynn's employment for weeks, coincidentally during her lunch hour. Very subtle, bro. I'm not playing their games. I'm not going to sit around waiting for any more innocent texts or coffee shop coincidences. I just received a missed call from Mom, which was most likely another lecture about how Wesley always made time for family or something. I'm going to sleep on the couch tonight. Tomorrow's going to be fascinating. Edit. Holy cow, this blew out. Thank you for your support. To answer some typical questions. Yes, we are in couples counseling. No, I didn't know about the texts until yesterday. Wesley is still blowing up my phone. I left him on red. Some of you considered this a hoax because no mother would do this. You're lucky to have normal parents. Lynn texted me that she'll be staying at her sister's apartment until things quiet down. Yes, it will help. Mom has already called twice this morning, have not responded. I'll provide an update once I've determined my next course of action. Right now, I need a drink and some sleep. Update 1. First and foremost, I'd like to thank everyone who supported my last post. I wish I had better news, but everything happened precisely as some of you expected. Sorry for the lengthy post, but I needed to get everything off my chest. Quick recap. I'm 31 and I noticed my mother, Nancy, 55, acting strangely around my fiancé, Lynn, 28, and making jokes about my brother, Wesley, 29, being more of a man than me. You warned me, and I should have listened sooner. The last 3 weeks have been horrible. Lynn began going out more, claiming girls' evenings every Thursday and occasionally Saturdays. I didn't think much of it until I realized she came home smelling like Wesley's terrible fragrance. You know the type, the one that every wannabe Instagram fitness dude uses. Last Thursday, she stated that she was going to see her friend Amber for cocktails. Something felt odd. She was dressed differently than usual and had been texting all day with a strange smile. I decided to drive past Wesley's apartment complex on my way to meet Patrick for our weekly Thursday gaming session. Call it intuition or anything, but her car was right there in the visiting area. I waited in my truck for about 20 minutes, feeling my blood pressure rising with every minute. Then I noticed them through his ground floor window. They sat on his couch, her head on his shoulder, watching something on his laptop. My own brother and my fiancé, looking as comfortable as can be. I am not proud of what happened next, but I am also not regretful. I marched straight up and knocked on his door. The look on their faces as they opened it, Wesley in his dumb compression shirt, Lynn in the things I got her for her birthday. I'll never forget this. How long, is all I asked? Lynn began crying, but not the guilty type, but the I got caught kind. Wesley attempted to walk between us, inflating his chest like he often does. Bro, we need to talk about this like adults. I cut him off. How long? 2 months, Lynn muttered. It just happened. You're always working late, and Wesley understands me better. I laughed. Actually, I laughed. Understand you better? The guy who still lives in a rented studio apartment at 29? The one who sells overpriced protein powder to college kids? That's when everything started to go wrong. Wesley tried to throw a punch. He was always a hothead. I grabbed his arm and shoved him back into his flat. Really, you, my fiancé, and then try to hit me? Real classy, bro. I called our mother right there on speakerphone. Do you want to know what she said? She genuinely chuckled and said, well, honey, I tried to tell you. Wesley's always been the stronger one. Lynn needs a real man, not someone who's going to bore her to death. Within a few hours, the family group chat had exploded. Wesley played the victim, alleging I threatened him. I did not. Lynn used the butterfly emoji to accompany a hazy Instagram tale about following your heart. My mother began calling everyone, weaving her version of events in which I was the evil person who drove Lynn away due to my workaholic tendencies. Dad is staying out of it, which is typical. My sister texted that she is appalled with all of them. The extended family is divided. Half believes I should man up and fight for my relationship with my unfaithful fiancé, while the other half has some sense. Lynn moved out yesterday, while I was at work. She took everything I ever gave her, as well as other things she didn't own. She left her ring on the kitchen counter with the remark, I never meant to hurt you. Classic. The kicker? Mom organized a family supper tonight. Guess who arrived together? Yes, Wesley and Lynn are holding hands like teenagers. Mom looked so proud. You'd think she had planned a royal wedding. I didn't go, of course. I sat at home, looking for all the indications I'd missed, the unexpected gym sessions, the new clothes, the way she'd turn her phone away when texting Wesley, showing up at family occasions he typically avoided, and Mom's frequent comparisons. Here's the thing, I'm not sad. I am not even angry anymore. I'm just finished. I'm over Wesley's phony alpha guy act. I'm done with Lynn's victim routine. I'm done with Mom's manipulation. They think I'll just take it and show up at Christmas as if nothing happened. They have no idea what is coming. TLDR. I caught my fiancé with my brother. Mother practically arranged the whole thing. They're now playing the happy couple while portraying me as the bad guy, but I'm not taking it lying down. Edit. Many thanks for the prizes and messages. To everyone who has asked, yes, I have already spoken with a lawyer about what Lynn took, and no, I am not going to try to work it out as some of you advised. Some bridges need to be burned. Edit 2. Stop DMing me and asking for Wesley's Instagram. I understand you want to disgrace him, but I'm doing it my way. Update 2. It's been 3 weeks since my previous update, and holy, everything just went horribly wrong. Remember how Wesley and my mother used to gloat about how I'd ultimately come around and accept things as they are? Yeah, karma is a bitch, and I am her favorite wingman right now. First and foremost, thank you for all of your supportive direct messages. You guys kept me focused when I wanted to drink myself stupid. Special thanks to the person who advised that I look into Wesley's business methods. You were onto something there. So, remember how Wesley was constantly bragging about his personal training business? It turns out Mr. Perfect was not exactly following the rules. All those protein supplements he sold to his customers, he was getting them from a shady supplier and repackaging them in his garage. I may have provided an anonymous tip to the fitness certification board regarding his unlicensed practice. Whoops! What is the best part? He was conducting his business using Venmo and Cash App without reporting anything. That type of information tends to pique the curiosity of tax officials. I didn't even have to do anything illegal. I simply forwarded some of his social media postings where he was literally bragging about his cash-only dealings to the appropriate individuals. My mother, Nancy, was not pleased when Wesley's certification was suspended. She came to my flat last Tuesday, yelling about how I was killing the family. I just stood there sipping my coffee as she was having a meltdown in the hallway. My neighbor even filmed it. Thank you, Mrs. Johnson. TikTok truly took off. You're just jealous because Wesley's a real man, she yelled. I just chuckled and added, real men pay their taxes, Mom. The expression on her face was amazing. But this is where things get better. Remember how my mother was always the top real estate agent in our area? It turns out she's been cutting corners too. Nothing huge, but enough that when someone, certainly not me, began investigating her business operations, things became intriguing. What about those fantastic reviews she was always bragging about? Half of them vanished after being identified as suspicious. Lynn is beginning to detect flaws in her beautiful new man. Wesley had to cancel their weekend excursion since he could no longer afford it. She tried to contact me through Patrick last week, stating she misses our conversations. Yes, right. Patrick told her that I was too preoccupied with my new promotion to care about her drama. Oh, did I mention I was promoted? It turns out that channeling your anger into work rather than drinking produces positive results. The rise is good, but the timing is even better. Wesley is having to move back in with our parents because he can no longer afford his apartment. The family is now separated. Half of them are not speaking to me, which is good because I didn't like those cousins in the first place. The other half continues to send me funny emojis whenever Wesley or Mom write cryptic Facebook statements about being strong in the face of critics. Everything came to a climax last night at a family meeting intended to sort things out. Mom and Wesley ambushed me at Dad's home. They attempted to guilt-trip me about family loyalty while Lynn sat there looking uncomfortable. I quickly brought out my phone and showed the video of Mom telling Lynn that Wesley was more manly than me. Dad had not seen that one before. His face changed from crimson to purple quite quickly. He requested Mom to go. This is the first time I've ever seen him stand up to her. Wesley tried to get in my face, saying I was sad for not fighting fairly. I simply smiled and asked him how his protein shake company was going. He swung at me, missed, and his face hit Dad's coffee table. He now has a shattered nose that matches his wounded ego. Lynn began crying, stating that this was not what she wanted. I simply shrugged and replied, "You made your bed. I hope it was worthwhile." I then went out, leaving Wesley bleeding on Dad's carpet. This morning, my phone was flooded with alerts. Wesley's certification board made their final verdict online, and he will be barred from personal training for at least 2 years. Mom's real estate broker fired her after additional complaints surfaced, and Lynn? She is informing everybody who will listen that she made a mistake. What is the best way to exact revenge? I am truly happier today. I got my own place, my job is doing well, and I've met someone new who values loyalty. Life is funny like that. TLDR. Brother and ex-fiancé believed they had won via cheating. Mom backed them. I played the long game, legally revealed their nefarious methods, and now they're all paying the price, while my life is better than ever. Edit. Holy cow, this blew out. RIP. Inbox. No, I will not post the TikTok video. I'm trying to maintain some privacy here. Edit 2. Stop asking for Lynn's social media. It's not cool, guys. Edit 3. Yes, Wesley attempted to swing at me. No, I did not press charges. His shattered nose and ruined reputation were enough. Finally, an update. Thank you to everyone for your support. It's been 2 months since my last update, and things have really escalated. Grab your popcorn, for Karma has finally arrived, and she's a stone-cold TLDR. Wesley's life crashed. Lynn crawled back. LOL, no. And my mother's idyllic little world disintegrated. Sometimes vengeance is simply watching others kill themselves. At 6 a.m., the phone started vibrating. Last Thursday. I ignored Wesley's first several calls, but by the time I got out of the shower, I had 19 missed calls from him, Lynn, and my mother. Didn't bother phoning back. I just prepared coffee and watched the show on Facebook. Remember how I described Wesley's supplement business in my previous post? It turns out the protein shakes he was selling were not quite legal. Someone, not me, anonymously informed the health department about his unlicensed company. They conducted a surprise check and discovered his garage filled with outdated supplements that he was repackaging as premium protein blends. What is the best part? He had been peddling this trash at his gym. When word spread, his clients began commenting about feeling sick. The gym promptly dismissed him. His personal training certificate? Gone. My mother used to brag about her affluent clients. It's all gone. But wait, things get better. Remember the electrical work Wesley did at Mom's office? The one she kept telling me to admire because your brother is so handy? It's interesting how the building inspector showed up after receiving images of unlawful electrical work. My mother's real estate office had to close for 2 weeks for emergency repairs. It cost her a fortune, and she failed to close 3 sales. I did not do anything wrong. I simply ensured that the appropriate individuals received the correct information at the right time. Lynn began to reconsider her upgrade when Wesley found himself unable to pay their flat any longer. She genuinely showed up at my house last week, weeping about how she had made a mistake. I told her I was busy. I was actually preparing for a date with Zoe, the new receptionist at my gym. Yes, Wesley's former gym. Petty? Maybe. Worth it? Absolutely. The real satisfaction came during Sunday's family meal. Mom insisted on these wee-wee meetings, using them to highlight her successful offspring. This time, I did turn up. First time since the separation. I brought Zoe. Mom almost choked when she saw us. Wesley and Lynn were also present, both of whom appeared unhappy. Wesley is wearing his old high school clothes since he cannot afford new ones. Lynn was trying to capture my attention, but I was too busy telling everyone about my promotion, supervisor position, company truck, the full thing. Mom tried to divert the subject, but Dad, who has finally grown a spine, kept inquiring about my job. Then Wesley lost it. He began yelling about how I had wrecked his life. Mom leaped in to defend her precious baby boy. I just sat there eating potatoes while Wesley had a meltdown. He even accused me of reporting him to everyone. Of course, we couldn't prove anything. I simply smiled and inquired whether he had tried the new protein shakes at the gym. I heard they were legit. Lynn attempted to play mediator, which was amusing. Stephen, can't we all just get past this? Lynn, what are you moving past? Your decision to become a stronger man who now cannot afford Dollar General protein powder. Mom's real estate business is suffering. It turns out that when you lose your office for 2 weeks and are charged with health code breaches, people begin searching elsewhere. The gossip group she adored? They're having a field day with her handyman son and the expired supplement scandal. What about the cherry on top? Dad eventually spoke up. He told Mom he was weary of her playing favorites. He has been sleeping in the guest room and talks about taking some time to reflect. I did not have to throw a single punch or break any laws. I simply sat back and watched karma do her thing. Wesley's strength proved ineffective when his house of cards crumbled. Mom's beloved golden child is now the neighborhood joke, and Lynn, last I heard, is looking for teaching jobs in another district when parents at her school learned about the controversy. Me? Life is good. Zoe is great. She respects a man who works hard rather than just bragging about his protein shakes. The promotion came with a good raise, and best of all, I slept like a baby knowing that all I had to do was wait for their own deeds to catch up with them. Mom still calls occasionally, typically wailing about how I have pulled the family apart. I simply let it go to voicemail. Wesley attempted to connect on LinkedIn last week, denied. Lynn sent a lengthy email discussing closure. Unread messages were deleted. They desired a stronger man. They did get one, but it wasn't what they expected. Edit. Because people keep asking, yes, all of the reports and tips were entirely real. They were actually selling expired vitamins. The electrical work was clearly not up to code. I just made sure everyone noticed. My mother-in-law wrote my husband's ex's name on my birthday cake, so I pranked her back on hers. She went quiet, and I blocked her. Allow me to tell you about my mother-in-law, the queen of criticism. She made it apparent right away that she didn't like me or our marriage. Every time she entered our house, it was as if she had a radar for spotting flaws in everything. She had a secret plan to nitpick her way through our lives. Take this one instance. She stated that she preferred a specific type of tea and could not stand anything else. I thought I'd be the perfect host and get her that same tea, but it wasn't enough for her. As soon as she caught a scent, she acted as if I had served her some sort of deadly sludge and tossed it out, insisting she would never say she enjoyed something like that. But that was only the top of the iceberg. This woman had a knack for being snooty in the most innovative ways. She made sarcastic remarks about my cuisine, clothing choices, and even how I furnished our home. It felt like she had a personal vengeance against me. You'd think my husband would put his foot down and advocate for me, right? Well, he tried and failed. He'd always try to smooth things over, saying that she needed to respect our decisions and embrace me as a member of the family, but she wouldn't budge. It was as if she wanted to be the family's gatekeeper and determined I wasn't up to the task. Seriously, who does that? We were meant to be a family, yet she treated me like an intruder. So I couldn't believe it when I learned that my mother-in-law, of all people, had planned a surprise birthday party for me. It was a strange twist given that she had never been a fan of mine. I had conflicting feelings, wondering if she was pulling a prank or actually wanting to make amends. Little did I know that my birthday surprise was going to be anything but joyful. The day began with the usual birthday celebrations, balloons, decorations, and smiles. I tried my hardest to put my worries aside and enjoy the moment, but then the truth hit: the birthday cake. As they brought out the cake, I was delighted to see what it looked like, but imagine my surprise when I saw my husband's ex's name spelled out in huge, strong characters rather than mine. Seriously, how could this happen? I glanced to my mother-in-law, trying to figure out what was going on. She had a smirk on her face that suggested she was hiding something. Then she casually said that she had misspelled my name because she was becoming older and forgetful. Yes, right. It was evident that she did it on purpose. Who misspells their daughter-in-law's name and writes the ex's name on her birthday cake? It felt like a cruel joke, and I couldn't believe she had sunk so low. Everyone else seemed to be in astonishment, unsure how to react. I tried to remain calm, but deep inside, I was hurt and enraged. It was difficult not to take it personally, given all of her caustic words and disdain. When my husband saw the birthday cake, he was as surprised as I was. He sincerely wanted to surprise me with a unique birthday celebration, but his mother stepped in and offered to prepare the entire thing herself. It felt like a promising sign that she was now willing to try to improve our relationship. She expressed to my husband that she wanted him to have a good relationship with me and was willing to make an effort. It was as if she was playing the part of a compassionate and understanding mother-in-law, leading him to believe she had turned a new leaf. He had no idea that it was all a ruse, a devious scheme to ruin my birthday and harm me in the process. I did not want to ruin the party, so I simply smiled. I had other things planned. Now, let me tell you some backstory. My mother-in-law seemed to have a penchant for causing difficulties by comparing me to my husband's ex. It was ironic, because my husband had informed me that she had never approved of his ex. Talk about déjà vu. What made it even more humorous was that my mother-in-law had been my father-in-law's second wife. It was as if she had casually forgotten her own history while messing with ours. The irony was too real. The narrative of my father-in-law was a mystery in and of itself. My spouse knew little about his other family, and I hadn't provided much information either. We just knew that my father-in-law had two families, and his other family seemed uninterested in this one. We heard rumors about a distant and troubled relationship with them, but the specifics were kept under wraps. It was as if there was a hidden barrier that we were never supposed to breach. After a year of marriage, I discovered that my father-in-law's divorce from his first wife was caused solely by my mother-in-law. It was like something out of a soap opera, with family secrets and drama around every corner. I couldn't help but wonder if my mother-in-law's incessant comparisons were an attempt to establish herself and fill the shoes of my husband's first wife. It was as if she was attempting to erase the past and establish herself as the ideal wife. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't change the fact that my husband's prior marriage was unrelated to me. We were our own pair, with our own special love story. Coming back to the present, as I previously stated, I did not respond. I simply smiled at her mistake. My mother-in-law's birthday was the next day, so I decided to return the surprise. I decided to play a prank by writing my father-in-law's first wife's name on the birthday cake rather than my mother-in-law's. Of course, I pretended to be completely innocent, blaming the bakery for the mix-up. Oh, her expression when she saw the cake, it was amazing. She was furious, and I couldn't help but smirk. It felt like karma had come full circle. All those times she had belittled me and made me feel unworthy, and now she was the one suffering the consequences. She began yelling and throwing a tantrum, but I stayed calm and composed. My husband attempted to calm her down, but she refused to listen to reason. It felt freeing to watch her lose control for once. I innocently asked whether she was okay, appearing to be unaware of the situation. Inside, I was gleefully chuckling. But she stormed out, unable to take the humiliation. My husband seemed perplexed and inquired as to if I had done it purposely. I refused to admit the reality, so I pretended it was an honest mistake. Come on, I must have picked up the wrong cake, I said with a completely innocent smile. He was completely taken in. It was my little secret, my opportunity to give her back what she deserved. I knew I shouldn't have descended to her level, but I couldn't stop myself from giving her a taste of her own medicine, and it felt great. Do you think I went too far by bringing up past wounds? My small birthday cake prank appears to have sparked quite a controversy. My mother-in-law is constantly moaning, claiming that I did it on purpose. However, as the saying goes, what goes around comes around. Of course, I denied it and pretended to be completely innocent. I reminded her about the time she ruined up my birthday with the tea incident and how I didn't respond the same way she did. Come on, it was only a cake, right? There's no need to blow everything out of proportion, but you know how mother-in-laws are. They're always looking for an excuse to be dramatic. She enjoys the spotlight, and this was her chance to shine. The entire family is aware of how volatile she can be, so it comes as no surprise that they are all on my side. They've witnessed her dramatic antics before, and they're not buying it this time. It's actually rather funny how the tables have turned. She's used to being the center of attention and getting her way, but this time, she's left red-faced and enraged. I have to say, I am loving the program. My spouse seems to be torn between defending his mother and believing me. But, well, I'm not going to tell you about my little joke. Let him think about what he wants. Everything's in good humor, right? Update 2. Since the small cake prank, my mother-in-law has been surprisingly quiet and has not bothered us much. It's like a breath of fresh air, and life has become significantly more calm. Maybe my little joke had a bigger influence on her than I realized. Perhaps she realized her dramatic theatrics were not getting her anywhere and decided to tone it down a notch. Or perhaps she's simply sulking in a corner, nursing her injured pride. Regardless, I'm not complaining. I can finally breathe without being constantly scrutinized and criticized. It's as if a weight has been removed off my shoulders, and I feel more liberated than ever before. Of course, I am not stupid enough to believe that this newfound peace would remain indefinitely. Knowing my mother-in-law, she might be able to recover from her drama quickly. But for now, I'm just going to enjoy it. Update 3. You know the saying, if you can't defeat them, block them. And this is exactly what I did. Life has been so much better since I decided to block my mother-in-law. No more nagging or drama, only lovely, peaceful silence. And thank you to everyone who supported me in the comments. It is comforting to know that I am not alone in dealing with a dramatic mother-in-law. Your words of support have given me strength. When she confronted me about blocking her, I just acted calmly and blamed it on network troubles. Hey, a little white lie never hurts anyone, right? Furthermore, it's enjoyable to tease her a little. I must say, I'm loving my newfound power and control. Blocking her has given me a sense of freedom and calm that I never thought imaginable. It's as if I have the remote control for her drama, and I get to choose when to turn it on or off. To everyone dealing with a dramatic mother-in-law, be strong and don't allow anyone to knock you down. Until next time, be careful and live your best life. Bye for now. Opinion 1. NTA for sure. Dealing with a demanding mother-in-law may be a nightmare, and you took the necessary precautions to keep your sanity. Blocking her was a wise decision, because network troubles occur all the time, right? You deserve to live a tranquil, drama-free existence. Don't allow someone to guilt you into coping with unwanted karma. Continue doing you and enjoy the well-deserved peace. Opinion 2. NTA is my gal. Mother-in-laws can be a pain in the neck at times, and you may have to take action yourself. It's critical to prioritize your mental health, and if that means avoiding toxic people, then so be it. Stay strong, and don't let anyone make you feel guilty about putting yourself first. My mom sold my stuff and pawned my laptop. I called the cops, had her arrested, and filed a restraining order. Christmas dinner was almost finished when my father put down his fork, looked me directly in the eye, and said, "You are a burden, and you can no longer live with us." At first, I assumed I had misheard him. My mother let out a strange, nervous laugh, as if she wasn't convinced he was serious. But then he simply sat there, staring at me, waiting for a reaction. The room went silent. My younger sister Lily froze with her fork halfway into her mouth. She glanced at me with wide eyes, as if she couldn't believe what she'd just heard. I swallowed the slice of ham I was chewing and set my fork down. "What?" "You heard me," he stated. "You've overstayed your welcome. You need to move out." The reality check. I just sat there, trying to process. I was 23. I had a regular career and could have left long ago, but I stayed because they needed me. I paid the energy bill, internet, and groceries most weeks, which they couldn't afford because my father had been unemployed for years and my mother only worked part-time. I was not a burden. I was the reason the lights remained on in that house. And now, out of nowhere, I'm being tossed out like a useless freeloader. Mom has finally spoken up. "Maybe we should talk about this later." "No," Dad interrupted. "This is my house, I make the rules, and I say he's done here." Lily's fear. Lily set down her fork. She was barely 16, and I could tell she was afraid. She looked at our parents as if she didn't recognize them. What did it mean for her that they could throw me out so easily? I took a deep breath. I wasn't about to argue or plead. What if they wanted me out? Fine. But they were not prepared for what that really meant. I slumped back in my chair. All right, I said. Dad sat up straighter, as if he had won an imaginary fight. Mom still looked uneasy, but she said nothing. Perhaps she was in shock. Perhaps she didn't care as much as I imagined she would. I stood up, grabbed my plate, and took it to the sink. I didn't want to give them the reaction they expected. Instead, I gazed at Lily, who remained tight and uncertain. I gave her a slight nod. She was the only one at the table that I still cared about. Dad sipped his drink, as if nothing had happened. Mom returned to picking at her mashed potatoes. Lily continued looking at me, as if she wanted to say something, but didn't. I did not remain to complete dinner. I just walked out. The silent goodbye. That night, I walked directly to my room, closed the door, and began packing. I wasn't going to waste time figuring out why they were doing this. If they wanted me gone, I was gone. However, this meant they would lose all I had paid for. And I wasn't about to warn them. I packed quietly, but I could hear them talking below. Mom's voice sounded low and terrified. Dad's tone sounded forceful, as if he were attempting to persuade her of anything. I caught bits and pieces. He's old enough? We can handle it. He should have moved out years ago. An hour later, Lily knocked at my door. I opened it, and she slipped inside, closing it behind her. She appeared distressed, her eyes red as if she had been sobbing. What the hell was that? She said. I don't know, I replied, tucking my laptop into my bag. But I'm leaving tomorrow. She shakes her head. That's crazy. You pay for everything? They can't even afford food without you. Not my problem anymore. Lily bit her lip, clearly attempting to keep back more tears. Where are you going? I'll figure it out. The fact was that I had some money saved up, but I had not intended on moving out so soon. I'd have to locate a place quickly, perhaps staying at a friend's for a while. But I wasn't concerned. I would be all right. They would not. Lily paused. Can I? She stopped herself. I knew what she'd ask. She wanted to join me. But she was still in high school, and as much as I disliked leaving her behind, I couldn't bring her with me. You know they'd never let that happen, you said. She stared down at the floor. Yeah. I finished packing while she stood there, as if she didn't want to go. Finally, she sighed. You're going to regret this. I grinned. I know. The next morning, I left before they even awoke. I hauled my bags downstairs, loaded my car, and took one last glance around the house. There's no sadness. No regrets. Just relief. Then, as I was driving out of the driveway, I entered my banking app and erased my name off all bills. Electric, internet, water. Even the Netflix account I had paid for each of them. Without me, everything would shut down within a month. I grinned, put my car into drive, and drove away without looking back. For the next few days, I stayed at my friend Jake's apartment while looking for a place of my own. His sofa sucked. His dog, Max, would not stop looking at me while I tried to sleep. His roommate repeatedly asked, "Are you staying forever?" But none of this mattered. Because I was free. No more paying for a house that I didn't want to live in. No longer pretending to appreciate a man who threw me out of Christmas dinner. No more being regarded as a walking ATM. I was finally doing something for myself. 3 days after I left, my phone started ringing. Initially, I ignored it. 7 missed calls from my mother. My father called me twice, which surprised me because he seldom did. Lily sent a handful of SMS. I also ignored those. Until she sent it. They're freaking out, the power's been cut off. I grinned. They honestly believed that the bills would magically pay themselves. Then, another text. Dad's losing his mind. He said you did something to the house. Oh, this was getting better. I could just imagine Dad stomping about in the dark, cursing at my mother while she cried over the Wi-Fi being down. An hour later, my phone called again. This time, I responded. The moment I took up the phone, my mother's voice hit me like a hurricane. Kevin, we don't know what happened. The power's out. The internet's down. The water bill. You didn't pay, I replied simply. Silence. Then, in a hushed voice. You paid for these? I nearly laughed. Are you serious? Who else did you think was paying for them? She paused. Your father said. She interrupted herself. I already knew. My father was too proud to acknowledge he didn't know how things worked. He presumably assured her that everything would be all right. That the house would function flawlessly even without me. Not my problem anymore, I said. Kevin, please, we didn't mean. I hung up. Not my problem anymore. I assumed that was the end of it. They would figure it out. Perhaps my father will finally get off his ass and get a job. Perhaps my mother would work more hours. Perhaps they will sell something to keep the lights on. Either way, it's not my concern. The next morning, I awoke to a message from my bank. Fraud alert. A suspicious login attempt was detected. I sat up fast, my heart racing. I checked my email. 3 additional alerts. Someone had attempted to enter my account. And I already recognized who it was. I quickly logged in and went over my purchases. Nothing had been taken yet. But there it was. An attempt to reset a password. Another failed login. Then a third. I clenched my jaw. My father must have been quite desperate, calling Lily. I phoned Lily, she responded right away. I was just about to call you, she said quietly. Dad's freaking out. He keeps yelling about money. He was on the computer all morning. I breathed sharply. Trying to get into my bank account. She was silent for a second before cursing beneath her breath. Does he have my old passwords? I inquired. Probably, she confessed. You know how Mom used to keep them in that little notebook by the computer. I knew it. My father must have gone through that, figuring I'd be stupid enough to continue using the same passwords from high school. Kevin, Lily whispered. Her voice shook. He's really pissed. I think. She paused. I heard shouts in the background. My father's booming voice, the banging of doors, and my mother crying. I think he's going to do something stupid. Lily's words sent shivers down my spine. What do you mean? What did he say? I inquired, squeezing my phone more tightly. She lowered her voice. He's saying you ruined us. That you did this on purpose to screw him over. He's talking about calling the cops. I nearly laughed. For what? Not paying his bills? I don't know, she hissed. He's losing it. Mom's crying, saying she'll talk to you, but he won't listen. He keeps saying, he's not gonna get away with this. Kevin, I think he wants to go after you. That took the smile off my face. I had expected my father to get desperate. To beg. Perhaps even try to guilt trip me. But to believe he would gain revenge on me? That was a new level of foolishness. Locking down everything. Lock your door, I instructed her. If he does something crazy, call me. I hung up and quickly changed all of my passwords. Bank accounts, email, streaming services, even my Amazon login. Then I called my bank to report the hacking attempt. They had locked my account so tightly that I even had difficulty logging in for a few hours. I assumed that was the end of it. I was completely mistaken. That night, Jake and I were hanging out in his apartment, playing some ridiculous Xbox game. Then, bang! Someone slammed the door. Hard. Jake paused the game. Are you expecting someone? I was not. I already got a horrible feeling. I got up, walked to the peephole, and my stomach dropped. It was my father. He was standing in the corridor, hands clenched and breathing like a bull prepared to charge. Jake asked, "Who is it?" I stepped back from the door. My dad. Jake stood up. Dude, what's going on? Bang. Kevin, open the door. I did not move. Bang. This time, it's harder. I know you're in there. You think you can just walk away from this? Jake scowled at me. Dude, should we? Before he finished, my father kicked the door in. Calling 911. That was it. I grabbed my phone and called 911. My dad just showed up at my apartment, I told the dispatcher. He's banging on the door, yelling at me, and he just tried to kick it in. Jake stepped back. Kevin, this is crazy. I met his gaze. Yeah, I know. I held the phone to my ear while my father continued yelling, You ungrateful little. You think you can just walk away? You owe us? You? Sir, officers are on their way. The dispatcher stated. 2 minutes later, I heard sirens. Then my father's voice went silent. A knock at the door. Police, open up. I opened the door just in time to see 2 officers handcuff my father. His face was hot and his chest heaved, but as he noticed me standing there, his expression altered. There were no regrets. There is no humiliation. Just pure hatred. You did this, he muttered as he was dragged away. I simply stood there, unaffected. Because the reality was, he did this to himself. They took my father away that night, but I knew things weren't finished. An hour later, Lily called. "Mom's losing it," she explained. "She's crying and saying it's all your fault." "Yeah, that sounds about right. She keeps saying you have to fix this. She's already calling people, trying to get bail money." I nearly laughed. "With what money?" Silence. Because we knew they didn't have any. No electricity. There's no internet. No savings. And now there is no father figure to yell at everyone while trying to be in charge. Without me, they were sinking quickly. I should have felt bad. But I only felt relief. "Keep an eye on her," I advised Lily. "If she does anything crazy, call me." Lily texted me the next morning. "Mom's selling your stuff." I froze. Then I called her. She picked up immediately, her voice harsh. "I told you to fix this? Are you selling my stuff?" A pause. Then, bluntly, "We need money, Kevin." I clenched my jaw. "So you're stealing from me?" "You don't live here anymore," she yelled. "You left all this behind. It's in our house, that makes it ours." She felt no regret. There is no guilt. It's just entitlement. "I'm calling the cops." "Don't you dare." I hung up. Then I phoned the cops. 2 hours later, I received a call back. "We talked to your mother," the officer stated. "She wasn't happy, but she's agreed to hold your things until you can pick them up." I messaged Lily. "I'm coming over." But I should have realized they were not prepared. Because when I arrived at the house, something made my stomach plummet. My automobile, sitting on the driveway. It should not have been there, I had left it at Jake's flat. I turned off the engine, my heart thumping. My car wasn't simply here. It had been driven. The front seat was folded back, as if someone had sat in it. The glove compartment was open. And, worst of all, the gas tank was nearly empty. I clenched my fist. They'd stolen my car. The confrontation before I could exit, the front door swung open. My mother stepped outside, arms crossed. "You called the cops on me?" she remarked. "You stole my car," I snapped back. She scoffed. "It was just sitting there? You weren't using it." I stared at her, trying to grasp the absurdity of this logic. "It's my car. How did you even get it?" She didn't respond. But I already knew. They had an extra key. "Mom," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "If you don't give me my key, I'm calling the cops again." Her expression flickered for a second. Then, without speaking, she stormed inside. A minute later, she returned and threw the key at me. It struck my chest and landed on the grass. "There," she spat. "Happy?" I picked it up, trying not to be angry. "I'm taking my things. And then I'm leaving, for good." I walked past her and into the home. Lily waited in the hall, looking nervous. "She took your laptop and pawned it," she said quietly. I closed my eyes. Take a breath in, breathe out. Then I turned to my mother. "Where's my laptop?" She raised her chin. "I told you. We needed money. That was it." I took out my phone, dialed 911 for the second time this week, and let her watch. "Yes, I want to report a stolen vehicle and stolen property," I responded, looking her dead in the eyes. "My mother has just revealed that she pawned my laptop without authorization." Her face lost its color. This time, she was the one who had to deal with the police. My mother worried when she realized I wasn't bluffing. "You can't do this," she muttered, her tone low. "I'm your mother." I ignored her. "Yes, officer. I have proof that she admitted to taking my belongings and pawning them," I stated over the phone. "I want to press charges." Lily stood motionless, her gaze flitting between us. My mother's hands were shaking now. She was absolutely taken aback, as if she believed she could keep pushing and I would never push back. "Kevin," she said again, this time softly, like if she were pleading. "We're struggling. Your father's in jail." I had no choice. "You had a choice," I explained. "You could have worked more. You could have sold your own stuff. You could have asked for help instead of throwing me out like garbage." She blinked rapidly, her face contorted. I was angry. I laughed. "Yeah, so was I." I heard sirens outside. My mother jumped. A few minutes later, 2 officers walked through the door. "Sir, did you call about the stolen property?" one of them inquired. I nodded and pointed to my mother. "She took my laptop and pawned it. I want to press charges." My mother gasped as if I'd stabbed her. "Kevin, don't do this." The officers turned to her. "Ma'am, is this true?" She hesitated, her gaze shifting between me, Lily, and the cops. I could see her calculating, attempting to determine whether she could lie her way out of this. Then Lily spoke. She told him herself. Just before he called you. My mother snapped her head at Lily so quickly, it was almost frightening. You little. Ma'am. One of the cops interrupted her. Do you have a receipt from the pawn shop? Her face fell. She knew what was coming. They took her outside. I looked through the window while they spoke with her for a few minutes. Handcuffs appeared unexpectedly. She was straining, crying, and yelling. Neighbors looked through their blinds. The entire street most likely heard her weeping about how she was simply a struggling mother and how unjust this was. Lily's realization. Lily stood beside me, looking out the window. She gulped hard. Is this really happening? I nodded. Yes. And for the first time in a long time, I felt calm. The text message. My phone buzzed with a message from an unexpected number. You're going to regret this. My chest tightened. I read it again. Then I realized, my father had been released on bond. When I saw that message, I knew exactly what had occurred. Someone had bailed my father out, and I had a fairly solid idea who. Probably one of his old drinking cronies, or perhaps a distant family member who hadn't heard the entire story. In any case, he was done and angry. I showed Lily the text. Her face turned pallid. Kevin, you need to leave. No, I replied. I turned to face the cops, who were still outside dealing with my mother. Can I go in and get the rest of my stuff? One of them nodded. As long as it's okay with your sister. Lily was already moving. Let's make this quick. We walked upstairs and packed everything that was mine. Clothes, old video games. Even the silly things I had left behind, thinking I'd come back for them one day. I was not coming back. Ever. As I took the last box to my car, my mother was still crying in the driveway, pleading with the officers to let her go. This is a misunderstanding. He's my son. He wouldn't do this to me. I just strolled by her, unconcerned. She screamed my name, as if it would suddenly change anything. I got in my car. Lily stood in front of my window, shuffling from foot to foot. I don't want to stay here. I exhaled. I know you don't, but you only have 2 years until you're 18. She nodded with watery eyes. I'll be fine. I'll just be quiet and keep my head down. Call me if anything happens. She nodded again. Then headlights arrived on the roadway. An automobile turned onto our street. My stomach sank. It was my father. He pulled up right as I started the engine. He hardly had time to go before I put it in reverse and backed into the street. He stared at me with hatred in his eyes, as if he were about to approach and try something. I rolled down my window just enough to carry my voice. You try to come near me again, I'm filing a restraining order. His hands tightened into fists. You think you're better than us? I smiled. I know I am. Then I drove away. It was the last time I saw them. I blocked my parents' phone numbers, changed my financial information, moved, and never looked back. Lily's independence. Lily kept out for 2 years, just as she promised. She left as soon as she turned 18. She moved in with a buddy and headed off to college. We're still talking all the time. The consequences? My parents? My father never had a job. My mother lost the house a year later. They bounced around for a while, destroying relationships with family. And the last I heard, they were renting a dilapidated flat in a poor neighborhood. They attempted to reach out to me, Facebook messages, unknown numbers, even letters. I never responded because they had made their pick for Christmas dinner, and I made mine. My wife hired a trainer to lose weight. Now, she has filed for divorce and started flaunting her new life online, even starting an OnlyFans account. Hello everyone, before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let us keep this channel growing collectively. Thank you very much. Now, let's begin the video. What's up everybody? It's Dave here. Buckle up, because my life recently became a whirlwind. I'm 34, a typical warehouse manager living in Columbus. My life was not glamorous, but it was consistent. I had an excellent career, a great home, and was married to Carla. We had been dating for 5 years, married for 3, and I believed we had a good thing going. Sure, we weren't the romantic pair from TV, but we made it work. Bills were paid, we had date evenings, and the occasional disagreement was simply typical married stuff, or so I thought. Carla decided to embark on a major fitness adventure approximately 6 months ago. It came out of nowhere, but I was already on board. She joined an elite gym downtown that resembled more of a spa than a gym. She hired a personal trainer, Justin, and soon began discussing meal prep, macros, and detox programs. I did not mind. In fact, I encouraged her. Everyone should feel good about themselves, right? Plus, I believed it was simply a phase, similar to her brief knitting passion or her interest in tarot cards. At first, I even pitched in to assist her. I began taking on more of the housework, such as dishes, clothes, and groceries, so she could devote more time to her workouts. I figured that was a way to show her I cared. However, things began to change gradually, and not in a positive way. Carla's ego grew in proportion to her loss of weight. She got fascinated with her reflection, spending hours in front of the mirror perfecting her gym attire or photographing the perfect progress shot for Instagram. She wasn't doing it just for herself. She wanted an audience. I remember once suggesting that we see a movie together. It was Friday night, and I figured we could unwind like old times. She scoffed. "Dave, I don't have time to sit around, I have goals to crush." "Goals? What goals?" I inquired. We weren't discussing running a marathon or conquering Mount Everest. She was simply lifting weights and drinking green sludge. But I just shrugged it off. Perhaps I was being unreasonable. Then came the morning, which began like any other. I was half asleep, nursing my coffee before heading to work, while Carla was drinking her normal kale spinach catastrophe smoothie. She was dressed in her exercise clothes and swiping through her phone as if her life depended on it. She unexpectedly says, "I deserve more in life." I glanced up, still sleepy. "Huh? More of what?" She set down her smoothie and glanced at me, very serious. "My marriage is holding me back, Dave. I'm filing for divorce." I promise, I assumed it was a joke. I even laughed, thinking she was joking with me, but she wasn't. Her expression was stone cold. "I've outgrown this," she replied, as if I were an old piece of furniture she was about to discard. "You wouldn't understand," she explained. I sat there, fully unprepared. My wife, the lady I'd spent years with, casually dropped this on me like it was no big deal. I tried to digest her words, but all I could feel was a mix of amazement and wrath rising in my chest. "What do you mean you've outgrown this?" "Outgrown what?" I questioned you. She sighed, as if I were a child with too many questions. "Dave, I've been working on myself, trying to be the best version of me. And frankly, this life doesn't match my potential anymore. I want more than this house, this routine, this you." Her remark struck me. She did not even sugarcoat it. She saw me as part of the problem. Our existence together was no longer good enough for her. She grabbed her workout bag and walked out the door without saying goodbye. I sat there, staring at the half-empty glass of green sludge she'd left behind, wondering what the heck had happened. The day at work was a blur. I went through the motions, but my thoughts were focused on Carla. Was this real? Was she really abandoning me? We had had disputes previously, but divorce? It was so sudden and premeditated, and the way she said it, as if she'd been practicing this speech for weeks, made it plain she'd already made up her mind. Over the next few days, the flaws in our marriage became more clear. She hardly spoke to me unless it was to divide the house or set up mediation. She began staying out late, claiming she was at the gym or with friends. Her phone was glued to her hand, and her Instagram was flooded with selfies and messages like, "New chapter, who this?" and "Living my best life." Each post was a punch in the face, a reminder that she'd already moved on mentally, even though the paperwork hadn't been signed. One night, while looking through my own social media, I saw she had deleted every photograph of us, wedding photos and anniversary messages. It was as if I had been removed from her life totally. Meanwhile, her new photos were flooded with likes and comments from people praising her. "You're glowing. Such an inspiration." It made me sick. None of these individuals realized who Carla really was or what she was putting me through. Another night, I overheard her on the phone as I was preparing for work. She was in the kitchen, speaking to someone in that phony, syrupy tone she used when she wanted something. "Yeah, I just feel so free now," she explained. "I'm finally doing what makes me happy." She paused and giggled. "He doesn't even get it. He's stuck in the past." That was when it hit me. Carla wasn't simply leaving me, she was reinventing herself, and I was the anchor she was letting go. But here's the thing, I'm not the type of man to just roll over and accept it. She expected to steamroll me and go away with everything, but she was in for an unpleasant awakening. This was simply the beginning, and Carla might expect a fight. But wait, things get worse. One afternoon, I'm having lunch at a bistro near work. I was minding my own business, looking through my phone, when I overheard these two guys at the next table. They're talking about a fitness model they discovered online. I didn't pay much attention till one of them said her name, Carla. My stomach sank. They were giggling as they discussed how she had some premium content to promote. At first, I thought, no way, not Carla. But then one of them pulled up her Instagram on his phone. It was my Carla. They discussed how she had begun teasing an OnlyFans account by placing links in her bio, such as for the real workouts. My blood boiled. This was not merely a fitness phase. She was turning her newfound freedom into a full-fledged thirst trap for money. When I arrived home, I confronted her. She was seated on the couch, scrolling through her phone as if nothing had occurred. Carla, I asked, attempting to remain calm. What the hell is this OnlyFans thing I'm hearing about? She looked up, unaffected. It's my body, Dave, my choice, and it's none of your business anymore. I couldn't believe she had the nerve. None of my business? We're still married. You're out here selling yourself on the internet while I'm trying to hold our lives together. She rolled her eyes, as if I were some ancient relic who didn't get it. I'm not selling myself, it's content creation. Plenty of people do it. Besides, it's not like you're paying my bills anymore. That's when it struck me. Carla wanted more than just a divorce. She wanted a new life. A life in which she was the star, the main character, and I was simply an extra she had written off. She was neither embarrassed nor remorseful. If anything, she felt proud, as if she had finally discovered her real calling as an internet spectacle. Her actions continued to grow over the next few weeks. She began dressing as if she were auditioning for a reality show, with tight clothes, sky-high heels, and makeup applied like icing. Every time she walked out the door, she appeared to be heading to a red carpet event rather than the grocery store. The titles got worse. Living My Truth, No More Holding Back. And the one that made me want to toss my phone. She's not a wife anymore, she's a force of nature. The arrogance. While Carla was out playing superstar, I was left to deal with the consequences, lawyers, paperwork, and so on. Carla, however, was not as untouchable as she had believed. My lawyer, Steve, an absolute gem, had been doing some investigation. It turns out she has been seeing a gold digger, but with a gym membership. I believe you can guess who I'm talking about. Stay tuned, everyone. Things are going to become messy. I will provide an update as soon as possible. Update 1, what's up again, Reddit? It's Dave, your favorite soon-to-be divorced dude, and I have a front row seat to my ex's drama-fueled glow-up disaster. If you've been following along, you know that my wife, Carla, decided she was too good for this life, abandoned me, and has been parading around town like a fitness celebrity. But first, let's talk about Justin, the man who has been fueling this entire catastrophe. Yes, her personal trainer. Really unique, right? The moment I heard his name, I realized it wasn't simply another trainer-client connection. Justin was the type of guy you'd expect to see on a reality dating show. Shredded, spray-tanned, and about the size of a puddle. He was all charisma, biceps, and smirks, as if he had wandered out of a horrible rom-com. Carla was very open about their relationship. One day, she strode into the home after her workout, virtually glowing. Justin says I'm the strongest I've ever been, she boasted, without looking at me. Yeah, Carla. I'm sure Justin also told you he's never trained anyone like you before, because that's his script. A few weeks later, she stopped pretending it was just an exercise. She began mentioning his name in everyday conversations. Justin's taking me to this new vegan restaurant, and Justin said this protein powder is life-changing. Meanwhile, I'm standing there like, do I look concerned? Carla wasn't simply dropping names. She was parading him as if he were the prize. Word spread quickly. Friends began contacting me with sightings of Carla and Justin throughout town. They were holding hands, laughing, and behaving like the Instagram couple of the year. Carla did not even bother to hide it. She came home one night, as brash as ever, and said, just so you know, Justin and I are dating now. I think it's time you accepted that. Oh, I accepted it, all right, I said. Accepted that my wife had turned into a full-blown caricature of entitlement. She'd already psychologically divorced me, so what did it matter if she added a public affair to her resume? The more I discovered about Justin, the hotter my blood became. He wasn't your typical gym bro. This individual had a past. My lawyer, Steve, who deserves a freaking medal at this point, did some research and discovered that Justin had pulled this stunt previously, twice actually. He had a pattern. Find a married woman, shower her with compliments and affirmation, and then urge her to leave her spouse. When the dust settled and the money stopped coming, he'd disappear like Houdini. Justin was a professional home wrecker. It was not love, it was a hustle. He pumped these ladies up, made them believe they were invincible, and rode their wave until it was no longer convenient. And Carla? She was the ideal mark. She sought attention and approval, just like a fish craves water. Justin had her wrapped around his finger, and she didn't realize it. The worst part was his smug attitude about it. I heard from mutual acquaintances that Justin was already discussing their major plans. He reportedly told someone, "Once the divorce is finalized, Carla and I are going to build an empire." Empire? Dude, you are a trainer, not a tech mogul. But, certainly, dream big. Justin was banking not just on Carla's money, but also on mine. Carla demanded half of my funds, spousal support, and even tried to take the house. She imagined she could stroll into court, play the victim, and walk out with a golden ticket to her and Justin's new life. Little did she know, my lawyer had receipts, and I wasn't going to give up. Let me paint a picture of Carla and Justin as a couple. Imagine a guy who only owns tank shirts standing next to a lady who suddenly believes she is a Kardashian. They were all over social media, posing in front of nice cars, not their own, and tagging themselves at costly restaurants. I'm guessing Carla was paying the tab. It was as if they were screaming, "Look at us, we're winning." But anyone with half a brain could tell they were overcompensating. Their partnership was not without flaws, however. Justin's over-the-top personality began to conflict with Carla's developing diva mentality. One night, I heard Mom on the phone in the kitchen, shouting with someone. "I don't care what your exes said about you, Justin. You're with me now, and I deserve better than your baggage." I didn't catch the rest, but it was enough to convince me that their little fantasy wasn't as flawless as they wanted everyone to believe. As much as it irritated me, there was something strangely fulfilling about seeing Carla go all in on Justin. She'd put everything on this guy, believing he was the key to a better life, and it was only a matter of time before the house of cards collapsed. My lawyer and I were making certain of that. Carla's confidence dipped after mediation. She entered the room acting like Beyoncé and exited looking like a deer in headlights. It was beautiful. Justin, her ever-loyal hype guy, did not even attempt to console her. He simply sulked behind her, scrolling through his phone. That was my first indication that their small empire was not as strong as Carla had led everyone to believe. But let's go back a little bit. Mediation was not only a setback for Carla, it was a calamity. She expected to come in, cry a little, and go with the house, half my savings, and spousal support. Carla's counsel portrayed her as an underappreciated wife who gave up all for my mediocre goals. Do you have mediocre dreams? I'd been working my ass off at this warehouse job for years. Steve, my lawyer, was prepared. He provided spreadsheets, screenshots, and even credit card stubs to back up my claims. Carla had been depleting our joint account for months before she filed for divorce. We're talking luxury spa days, expensive outfits, and $200 dinners while I'm eating leftovers and attempting to find out what went wrong. Steve made sure the court saw every dime she squandered. Then came Justin's skeletons. His previous romances, his habit of sweet-talking married women, and how he always bailed when the money didn't flow as planned. What about the cherry on top? Steve discovered messages from one of Justin's exes urging Carla to be cautious. Of course, Carla refused to listen. She felt she was unique. Justin's smirk was also gone. In fact, he appeared uneasy. He probably saw his little scheme was crumbling in real time. Carla attempted to defend him, stating, "Justin isn't like that anymore." However, the evidence was stacked against them. The judge didn't buy their act. By the end of the session, it was evident Carla wasn't going to walk away with the riches she expected. Justin? He appeared to be already plotting his exit route. Carla began acting out after the mediation session. She wasn't as arrogant anymore. She continued to post uplifting rubbish on Instagram, but the captions became frantic. Instead of living my best life, Carla said things like, "Growth isn't always easy, but it's worth it. Keep reminding yourself of this." Justin, on the other hand, revealed his true colors. He was still present, but not in the way Carla described. He began skipping their public appearances, no more hand-holding at posh restaurants or couple goals gym photos. Word spread that he was already flirting with one of his other clients, a younger woman who did not come with Carla's baggage. Typical. Carla was late getting home one night. I was still living in the house with her at the time, as I couldn't legally kick her out. She stumbled in, looking completely exhausted. I didn't say anything, I simply sat there on the couch, observing her. She placed her fancy bag on the counter and sighed dramatically, as if she wanted me to ask what was wrong. But I was not playing that game. I just went inside my room. Carla tried to act normal the next morning. She went around the kitchen preparing one of her kale smoothies, but her typical smugness had vanished. "Justin's been busy with his clients," she announced unexpectedly. I did not respond. I knew she wanted me to bite and ask about him, but I wasn't giving her what she wanted. A week later, the real drama began. Steve called me. Carla apparently filed some last-minute paperwork in an attempt to claim additional assets. She demanded emotional compensation for the stress I had given her during our marriage. Yes, you read it correctly. Carla believed she might acquire more money by blaming me for her midlife crisis. I couldn't believe their arrogance. Steve, being the legend that he is, was already ready for this crap. He filed a countersuit, demonstrating how Carla had depleted our funds and emotionally manipulated the situation to her advantage. He even used her Instagram posts as evidence. The subtitles alone were great, proving that she wasn't some stressed-out victim, but rather a self-absorbed diva living her best life at my cost. Around this point, Justin officially quit. He stopped showing up to their gym sessions, stopped returning her calls, and even blocked her on Instagram. Yes, it's blocked. Carla was losing it. I could hear her pacing around the house, calling him repeatedly. "Justin, call me back. We need to talk." She sounded desperate, and it was actually satisfying. Finally, one of her companions spilled the tea. Justin had moved on to another client, someone younger, flashier, and, more crucially, not involved in a difficult divorce. Carla was devastated. She tried to keep things cool by posting cryptic comments like, "Sometimes people aren't who they seem," and, "You can't build an empire with someone who's playing games." But everyone understood what had transpired. Her ideal man had bailed the moment things became tough. This is when Carla's entitlement began to shatter. She has stopped attending the gym. Her once glamorous ensembles were replaced by sweatshirts and unkempt hairstyles. She even stopped posting on Instagram for a spell, which was really surprising. It was as if her entire identity was linked to Justin and the vision of their new life. Without him, she had no idea what to do. One evening, she attempted to speak with me. "Dave," she started, standing in the living room doorway, "I think we need to reevaluate everything. This divorce, it's been hard on both of us." I gazed at her, waiting for the punchline. "What are you getting at, Carla?" She sighed heavily, as if she were the victim here. "I just think maybe we rushed into all of this. I mean, we had good times, didn't we?" I nearly laughed. "Carla, you filed for divorce. You told me I was holding you back, remember? Now that Justin's gone, you're having second thoughts? Unbelievable." She tried to play the compassion game by mentioning how lonely she was and how much she had given for this marriage, but I wasn't buying it. "Carla," I interrupted. "You made your bed. Now lie in it." Carla's tiny fantasy world was collapsing, and I didn't have to raise a finger. Karma was doing all of the work. That's all for now, Reddit. I'll keep you posted after the final court ruling, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. Update 2. Hey, Reddit. Dave is back. You've stayed with me this long, so prepare for the grand slam of this whole disaster. If you've been following along, Carla, my ex-wife, believed she could go to court, take everything, and begin her new life with Justin, her personal trainer. But karma came calling, and we're now in the home stretch. Let me explain how the courtroom drama unfolded and why Carla probably wishes she hadn't gone in there. Court day eventually arrived. Carla stepped in, but not with the usual diva strut I'd come to expect. No fancy blazer, no cocky grin, just her and her lawyer, marching into detention with the confidence of 2 children. She must have realized things weren't going to go her way. The energy was off, and I honestly enjoyed every moment of it. On the other side, I was with my lawyer, Steve. He arrived prepared, carrying a thick binder that could have served as a doorstop. I was not nervous at this time. I had nothing to lose. Carla had already thrown all of her punches, and I was still standing. Today was about ensuring that I not only survived, but also won. Carla's lawyer began by presenting her emotional compensation claim, which I mentioned earlier, portraying a picture of Carla as a patient wife who had been emotionally exhausted by my lack of support for her personal development. Apparently, my failure to support her fitness journey, also known as her affair with Justin, was a sort of neglect. Steve, my lawyer, let her lawyer speak for a long, enabling them to dig their own hole. Then it was our turn. Steve began by meticulously demolishing their argument. He demonstrated that I had not only supported Carla, but had gone above and above on her so-called fitness journey. He provided evidence that I had taken over home tasks, modified my work schedule, and even pushed her to pursue her ambitions. He read aloud text conversations in which I offered to make her healthy meals, encouraged her gym sessions, and even suggested we join couples fitness classes to deepen our bond. Then Steve dropped the bombshell. Carla's emotional compensation claim was not only unfounded, it was a clear attempt to conceal her own emotional carelessness. He showed emails and texts in which Carla openly mocked me to her friends, calling me dull and dead weight. He also had screenshots of her gushing about Justin and referring to me as her backup plan. The final nail in Carla's coffin came when Steve addressed the financial side of her claim. He showed us our bank statements, revealing how Carla had diverted thousands of dollars from our joint account to fund her lavish lifestyle. Carla's lawyer attempted to argue, but Steve refused to give up. He disclosed the ultimate piece of evidence, Carla's journal entry, which Steve had subpoenaed. Carla had written about her master plan to leave me, get whatever she could out of this marriage, and use the settlement money to start a new life with Justin. When the judge read that, his expression was one of complete amazement. The courtroom was dead silent as the judge flipped through the documents, his stern look becoming more intense with each page. Carla sat next to her lawyer, looking agitated, her polished nails nervously pounding on the table. Her confidence, which she had displayed so brazenly during mediation, had vanished into thin air. I sat across from her with my lawyer, Steve, feeling a mixture of expectation and joy. This was it. The moment Carla's tale would crumble. The judge began by considering Carla's emotional compensation claim. Mrs. Patterson, he continued, his voice steady yet forceful. Your request for emotional compensation lacks any substantive evidence. He stopped, allowing the words to sink in before continuing. While emotional anguish is a relevant component in some situations, this court expects concrete and demonstrative evidence. Your claims are based on subjective sentiments rather than facts. He focused his attention on Steve's counter-arguments. He detailed phone conversations, bank accounts, and Instagram posts that depicted a far different picture than Carla and her lawyer had attempted to present. Mr. Patterson, the judge continued, speaking to me for the first time. You've shown a clear and consistent pattern of support for your wife throughout the marriage. The evidence presented indicates no signs of emotional maltreatment. In reality, it indicates the reverse. You went above and beyond to meet her requirements and expectations. Carla's lawyer attempted to interject, but stumbled over an objection that the evidence was taken out of context. The judge silenced him with a raised hand. The context is clear, counselor. Let him move on. The judge next went to the financial element of the issue. He painstakingly examined the evidence Steve had supplied. Mrs. Patterson, the magistrate said in a stern voice, you withdrew over $223,000 from your joint accounts in the period leading up to this divorce filing. These funds were not used for household expenses or shared needs. Instead, they were spent on luxury items, high-end dining, and personal indulgences. The court finds this behavior irresponsible and in direct violation of your marital financial obligations. Carla shivered in her seat, her face flushed deeply crimson. Her counsel attempted to downplay the expenditure, stating that it was part of her coping technique during a tough period. The judge wasn't impressed. Coping mechanisms do not justify financial recklessness, he stated emphatically. Then I came home. Carla had boldly asserted her right to half of it, stating she had contributed emotionally, if not financially, to its upkeep. Steve was prepared for this. He presented paperwork proving that I had paid the mortgage in full, maintained the property, and even handled renovations, all while Carla contributed nothing. The judge did not mince words. The house will remain the property of Mr. Patterson, his announcement stated. Mrs. Patterson, you have no financial claim to it based on the evidence presented. Carla's jaw dropped. Her lawyer whispered something into her ear, but she waved him away, too astonished to answer. The judge was not done. Furthermore, he went on. Due to the unauthorized use of marital funds, Mrs. Patterson is ordered to reimburse Mr. Patterson in the amount of $23,750. You could have heard a pin drop. Carla's lawyer sagged in his chair, clearly defeated. Carla appeared to have lost her breath. Her carefully constructed narrative had fallen spectacularly, leaving her with only the repercussions of her actions. The decision was final, no appeals or loopholes. The judge closed his folder and announced, "This court is adjourned." I relaxed back in my chair, a sense of relief sweeping over me. Justice had been served, and I felt free to breathe for the first time in months. The anxiety in the air as we left the courtroom was apparent. Carla's lawyer was already packing his suitcase and avoiding eye contact with everyone. Carla walked following him, her head lowered. For someone who had entered this process with the confidence of a reality TV star, she suddenly appeared completely defeated. Steve rubbed my back as we walked out. We did it, he added with a slight smile. I nodded, appreciating his work. He had not only supported me, but also revealed the truth about Carla's manipulating ways. As I left the courthouse, I couldn't help but look back at Carla. She remained standing there, staring blankly at the floor. For a fleeting moment, I felt a twinge of sympathy, but it immediately disappeared. She had caused this pandemonium, and now she had to face the repercussions. Over the next few days, the consequences of the decision became abundantly clear. Carla was told to leave the residence within 30 days, and I made sure to enforce it. She tried to stall, stating she needed more time to organize her affairs, but I wouldn't budge. I informed her that she'd had plenty of time to prepare while she was busy bragging about her affair with Justin. But reluctantly, she packed her belongings and moved out. It was surprisingly pleasant to watch her leave on that final day. She piled her luxury bags into an ancient automobile, which one of her friends had reportedly loaned her, and drove away without saying goodbye. The house, which had before been filled with tension and hostility, felt unexpectedly tranquil. Carla's financial position deteriorated dramatically. She was left to fend for herself because she no longer had access to my income or the marital funds she had been draining. She attempted to sell some of her fancy clothes and handbags, but it was insufficient to repay the sum she owed me. Word spread that she was borrowing money from friends, who were rapidly bored of hearing her sob stories. Justin, however, has completely vanished. He didn't respond to her calls or messages. Carla unexpectedly arrived at the residence one night, roughly 2 weeks after the verdict. I opened the door to see her standing there, her once perfect beauty replaced by unkempt hair and haggard eyes. She looked like she hadn't slept for days. "Dave," she replied gently, her voice cracking. "Can we talk?" I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. "What do you want, Carla?" I inquired. She hesitated and wrung her hands. I wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. I made mistakes, big ones. I let Justin manipulate me. I got caught up in this fantasy, and I ruined everything." Her comments seemed scripted, but the despair in her eyes was genuine. She didn't come to apologize out of true remorse. She was here because she had no other options. "I don't know what you expect me to say," I said, my tone calm but forceful. "You made your choices. You chose Justin. You chose to try and take everything from me, and now you're dealing with the fallout." Tears welled in her eyes. "I just can't. We at least be civil? Maybe start over?" "I have nothing, Dave. I'm lost." I looked at her for a time, feeling nothing but resolve. "Carla, I gave you everything, my support, my trust, my love, and you threw it all away. You don't get to come back now and ask for a second chance. That's not how this works." She fell down sobbing on my porch, but I didn't move. After a time, I returned inside and shut the door, leaving her alone with her regrets. Since then, I've moved on. Carla, according to what I've heard, is still battling to get back on her feet. She's destroyed bridges, lost friends, and is now facing the consequences of her own actions. Sometimes karma doesn't just knock. It kicks down the door. Carla was left with only the repercussions of her deeds. My wife returned from a work retreat with a hickey. She swears it's a bug bite, but I'm not convinced. I'm at a loss. How do I move forward? I'm 27 million, in a fight with my wife, 28 million. We've had fights before but not this bad. I'm at a loss on how to proceed. For context, we're college sweethearts married for almost 6 years. We have a daughter, 4F. Our relationship was never perfect or without challenges. We've faced some family opposition with cultural differences, but we've made it work. She's my first love and my best friend. My wife works in a corporation. Her job has annual work retreats that last for about a week. This year was in Vegas. I usually arrange my work schedule and tag along with her, and we make our own trip out of it. We couldn't this year. Our daughter gets major anxiety traveling long distances. We're working on it, but she wasn't budging, and we decided to choose our battles. So I stood behind and held down the fort at home. The change of plans was a bummer because the trip was part of us reconnecting as both a couple and as a family. My wife's work hours have taken a toll, and her work-life balance leaves much to be desired. We entertained the idea of her skipping the retreat. Attendance is optional, but it's generally frowned upon if you don't, and my wife's making connections in her field. She grew increasingly weird. We have a system if either of us is away for extended periods. We keep in contact. For the first day or so, she was herself, but she grew distant. I'd even text her about important stuff and be left on read while she claimed she never saw my text. Whenever we talked, she was rushing me or our daughter off the phone. These were all times she wasn't involved in retreat activities. We were supposed to have a mini birthday celebration for our daughter over FaceTime. Our daughter was excited. It was something my wife promised her because the retreat overlapped her actual birthday. But my wife backed out because she had people up to her room after a seminar. It was like she wanted my permission to break her promise to our daughter. I told her I wasn't offering that nor making her keep her word. She said I wasn't being fair, and this was a networking opportunity. They were business-oriented and wouldn't understand her stepping away for family time. I said her decision is her decision, but she'd have to explain it to our daughter. She promised her that she'd rain-check the following day. Our daughter didn't understand and cried. My wife ended up hanging up and leaving me to comfort our daughter alone. That whole incident rubbed me the wrong way. I didn't like it. She didn't keep her word for the rain check either. She was documenting the retreat on social media. One coworker, 23 million, was almost in every pic video attached to her hip. In one pic he had his arm too comfortably around her IMO. He's a recent hire in my wife's department. She was asked to oversee him. I don't like the guy. He doesn't know boundaries. Once, in response to a work assignment, he texted my wife that she's exactly the kind of woman he needs to keep him in check. My wife had brushed it off. She feels bad for him because he's not fitting in. She took him under her wing during his first retreat with the team. If I'd questioned, she'd say she was tired or networking. There was always something. But I've seen her at these retreats. This wasn't like her. She was just off. The day before her return home, she complained about a bruise on her neck. She stressed it was a bug bite. I didn't actually see the bruise until she came home. I instantly thought it was a full-on hickey. She kind of brushed it off after making a big deal of it over the phone. I didn't push because our daughter was present. But when I was able to confront her, she clung to her bug bite claim. When I kept pushing, she asked what I was trying to imply. I outright said I believed she had a hickey, and I didn't believe she was being honest with me. We had it out then. She was offended and pissed at the accusation. Infidelity has always been a sore topic. Her family has a history of infidelity. So we had a pretty bad fight, and she accused me of looking to pick a fight due to the incident with our daughter's birthday. I told her it had nothing to do with that and everything to do with a hickey on her neck. The fight ended in an impasse. We're still not recovered. She swears it's a bug bite. But I'm not convinced. I've always trusted my wife. I never doubted her, but this bruise doesn't look like a bug bite. It looks like a hickey. I only feel more strongly when I consider how distant and weird she was during the Vegas retreat. Now she's been wearing turtlenecks ever since, and we're caught between arguing and her dousing our daughter and me with affection. Communication usually prevails for us, but not now. I think my accusation pushed us to a new level of argument. I'm at a loss here. I really need outside perspectives. How do I move forward? Comments. Comment 1. I have been to Vegas and never saw a single bug. It is like dry as fuck, desert-like. Not saying they aren't there, but it's not like she was in the Mayan Riviera. This is all super sus. Don't let her gaslight you. She clearly got a hickey, which is dumb as fuck in itself, probably from the idiot who is too inexperienced to know what he was doing, and preemptively came up with an excuse knowing what it would look like. Out of character behavior. Neglecting her daughter. New young guy hanging off her, that is in photos she knew you could end up seeing. What about what you couldn't see? Eyebrow-raising texts. Comment 2. I used to travel regularly to Vegas several times a year for about 8 years, worked for the gambling industry. I have never seen a bug anywhere in the vicinity of Las Vegas. What I did see though was a lot of drunks and infidelity. I'm not saying she cheated. But he's right to be suspicious. Comment 3. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I've never gotten a bug bite that looked like a hickey. Did she show you her phone or provide any proof that could support her innocence or just dismiss you? The extra affection is a common move from guilt-ridden cheaters. Even if we stretch the imagination and believe it is a big bite, she wasn't acting trustworthy, nor was she a good mother while she was in Vegas, and she needs to address and correct that. OP. No, I haven't had access to her phone. We usually have an open phone policy, but it's not something we've ever really done. I'm sure it'll be another argument. Yeah, you don't get to disconnect from being a parent, especially to a minor, for extended holidays. You certainly don't ghost them on their birthday and when you promise to do something special for them and got the child excited about it, or hang up on them while they're crying. I'm not insecure. My wife's gone on retreats before. We both work outside the home and have the care for our daughter. So it's not an imbalance. My wife's work-life balance is out of sorts. She's in the company of other adults plenty. I've been with my wife on these retreats and other social events. I know how she is. She was off this entire trip, nor was it appreciated her entertaining a coworker who ignores boundaries, having his arm wrapped around her waist like he was claiming her or something. I trusted her when she said she had a bug bite. I got things to help her treat it when returned. It was only after I saw the bruise in person that there was no mistaking it was a hickey for me, and I questioned her on it. Update, 7 days later. 27 million, wanted to give an update and thank everyone who reached out. The outside perspectives helped. Things are a roller coaster. I'm trying to process. It took a while for my wife, 28F, and me to have any real conversation about the bruise on her neck. We were stuck between arguing and her showering our daughter, 4F, and me with affection. I rarely saw the bruise because she was turtlenecked up. But I did note the healing process from reddish purple to yellow. There wasn't any more discussion about the Vegas retreat. She made it clear she was done talking about it and that she shouldn't need to defend herself to her husband. I told her she could do whatever she wanted, but I was done being treated like an idiot, and I wasn't sharing a bed with someone I couldn't trust. So I moved into the guest room. Communication stopped. The silences were palpable. Even our daughter noticed. I'm not proud of that. I try keeping her out of fights. My wife came to the guest room one night and asked if we could talk. I could tell she'd been crying. She said she hated the way things were between us. She felt she was losing me either way. I told her I needed complete honesty. She confessed she hooked up with that coworker, 23 million, on our daughter's birthday. The hickey was from him. She was lost in the heat of the moment and didn't realize he was sucking so hard on her neck. By her account, they made out while doing some on top of the clothes stuff and then he went down on her. It stopped there because he called her by a nickname that I affectionately call her. It snapped her back to the reality of her actions. She went to splash water on her face and saw the hickey. The guy made light of it and made a joke about the hickey being her souvenir. She blew up on him and kicked him out of her suite. Part of the reason she was avoiding me was out of guilt. She said she's coming clean because she doesn't want to hide things anymore. I asked her why she cheated. What was it about that guy she deemed worth risking everything? She claimed it wasn't him specifically, nor is she unhappy with our marriage. She doesn't really know how to explain it, but a part of her feels broken. The more she looks in the mirror, the more she sees her dad, 57 million. A cycle of being consumed with work, distant from the child, and the infidelity he put her mom, 55 degrees Fahrenheit, through. She said her family never talked about anything openly and how when she was growing up, my mother-in-law never addressed anything with her. I said her parents didn't make her cheat. She chose to party up with a guy who constantly disrespected our relationship. These were all her decisions, and she at any point could have chosen our family. She agreed. She wants to blame her parents but realizes this is on her. She apologized for cheating and for entertaining the guy's advances. She said she'll do whatever it takes to repair. Go to HR, quit her job, counseling, anything. She wants to make everything right. I told her I don't know what right looks like or if that's possible for us anymore. I knew we had our problems, but I thought there wasn't anything we couldn't talk out. She insisted we still could talk it out. We didn't have to give up on us. She tried giving this rally cry for our relationship, but I felt very numb. I said I didn't recognize her. Not just the betrayal of our vows but also how she treated our daughter. She's like a stranger. She feels she failed as a wife and mom, but she loves us both beyond words and wants our life together and our family intact. I told her I couldn't give her the answer she wanted and thought we needed to separate and reevaluate. She didn't want separation. She felt we should stay together in our home, but I told her a separation was happening. Either she was leaving the home or I was with our daughter. She consented to leaving so as to best not uproot our daughter so much. She asked for our daughter not to be taken away from her. My wife's staying with my in-laws. I know that's difficult in itself because she doesn't have the best relationship with her parents. One of the hardest parts is the shift for our daughter. Right now, she believes her mom's just busy with work per usual. She hasn't questioned it too much. My mother-in-law called the other day. She made no excuses for my wife, but she's advocating for us to work through it. She told me times when she heard my wife describe me as the anchor she always wanted. She believes there's something worth fighting for if I'm open. Despite some family opposition we faced throughout our relationship, my mother-in-law was always a supporter of us. I'm even more at a loss. I never imagined this kind of betrayal from my wife. She was my safe place. I feel numb yet broken. I'm in love with her. That hasn't changed. But I don't see myself, her, our relationship, or our family the same. Everything's more tense because it's fresh. I think this period of separation is for the best. I'm not sure about divorce. I haven't let myself fully go there. I'm not set either way. I don't know where things go from here, but I'm focusing on our daughter and taking things one step at a time. I feel that's all I can do right now. Thanks again to everyone for the support, it's much appreciated. TLDR update 4. My wife returned from a work retreat in Vegas with a hickey on her neck. She swears it's a bug bite, but I'm not convinced. I only feel more strongly when I consider how distant and weird she was during the retreat. We're stuck between arguing and her dousing our daughter and me with affection. I'm at a loss. I really need outside perspectives. How do I move forward? Comments. Comment 1. Do you think she is still trickling through you? How would the coworker know your nickname for her? Good luck onwards. OP. Also think about this part of your comment whenever your wife tells you she is sorry. Cheating on you is one thing, but your wife's behavior towards her daughter is sickening. Comment 2. I was just on a work trip with a coworker who has a couple of little kids similar in age to OP's. He had arranged his travel times to make it easier on them and went back to the hotel to call them every night. Nothing about how the wife is acting is normal or okay. Comment 3. They didn't stop until he came inside your wife. You know that, right? Comment 4. She had plenty of time to craft a story where she was less offensive. He went down on her only? Okay. Comment 5. Yeah, that's a convenient story. It's bad but offers a glimpse of it's not so bad she didn't really do anything to him. That's just not believable to me. Also the MIL is not your friend here OP, she's trying to help her child. Again, don't settle for this treatment.